Luke Tastian. Today is October 7th. The zoning board of appeals for the town of New Canaan will come to order at 7:05 p.m. When we call your case, we ask that each presenter come up to the lectern, identify themselves and the property in question, state your request of the board, and identify your hardship and the reasons for the request. Remember, your hardship cannot be financial in nature. It runs with the land and is peculiar to your property. The board will then ask questions of you, after which you will sit down and we will give those present a chance to speak. You will then be given an opportunity to answer any questions or sum up your request. We record the meeting, so everyone must speak into the microphone and state their name. The board will then go into business session, discuss your matter and make a decision. There are 5 voting members on the board and it takes 4 positive votes to be granted a variance. I'm going to take attendance. You want us?
Sure. Chad Book.
Alex Snyder.
Rich Caratu.
Luke Tastian.
Jessica Garden, Cynthia Dell.
Brittany and Christie are absent. Currently, maybe they'll come in a few minutes, so we're going to sit Alexander Snyder for the first matter.
Chairman, could I just introduce to you all Stephen Payne? He is our assistant zoning inspector. He's been working with our department for about 1.5 years and wanted to bring him to the meeting tonight to partially speak on the second application and the appeal, and also just I plan to train him to start slowly taking over more of the ZBA staff role. So this is Stephen.
Thank you.
ZBA.
Nice to meet you. Okay. So first matter on tonight's agenda is 88 Richmond Hill Road. Zoning variance upon application of Anthony Carpentieri, owner for variance of section 3.5.E.3 to permit a sports court to be located within the side and rear yard setbacks in the B residence zone at 88 Richmond Hill Road, map K, block 10, lot 919. Sarah, do you have the receipts in?
Yes.
So I'm just trying to share my screen. You're not scared at all, you can share my screen again.
So when you speak.
Let's go with it.
Thank you.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. David Rucci, Lambertine Rucci, with the applicants this evening, Anthony Carpentieri, who's also with us this evening as well. We are here requesting a variance to allow 2 things. One, a sports court within the side yard setback of the property, and also to allow, which is an accessory use, and also to allow some retaining walls that have been built on the particular property that are near the property line. They're supposed to be set back a certain distance from the property line. These ones are on the property line. I think we've had these types of applications before with these particular retaining walls. So the first slide that I'm just showing you is sort of what the property looks like today. And then just to step back for a second. So this all came to this commission based on the fact that when the applicant was going to get a CO for his pool, he had already put in the sports court and the retaining walls, not knowing that a sports court in and of itself has to comply with the setbacks, the side yard setbacks. It's a basketball court. So I think that it's pretty standard that most of these basketball courts are on property lines to begin with. Usually they're in the front yard. Usually they're just right outside your garages. So I don't think there was much thought here as to this thing actually needing a separate permit in and of itself, unlike a tennis court or a paddle court. I just say that because that's sort of how it came to begin with. And also right next to this court to the south are the tennis courts of Mead Park, which end up right up against the property line of the client as well. So once again, just from from his perspective, just not thinking that this was something that needed additional approval. Notwithstanding that, when they came out to look at the CO for the pool, that's when these violations came up. And they were like, well, listen, you have a sports court here, or it's considered a sports court. We were hoping it wasn't going to be considered a sports court, but when you look at it, it's a sports court. So anyway, this is the property in and of itself. It's a very narrow lot. This is a property that sits sort of right as you start coming up the hill on Richmond Hill, right at the exit of the park itself, Mead Park itself.
David, where's sports court defined?
Sports court is in the regulations, section 6.5B2, I believe, is where it's going to be. In sports court. This is the engineering map, and I'm going to get to the pictures first, and I think I'm going to come back to these just so I can show. So here's sort of here's the entrance to the property in and of itself off 88 Richmond Hill Road. You can see that the property has sort of a steep decline in it where they've had to bring up the grade on this front area of the property. But you also note that, you know, they have a drainage in the property as well that takes care of some of the water coming off the house itself. You see that this is where the property exits onto Richmond Hill. And then this is like looking up back up the street. Here's 88. So it's your first house as you look back up the street of Richmond Hill Road. And you can see how the topography starts to slope back. So the applicant, when basically all these houses, you kind of have to use your backyard. I mean, nobody is really out on the street of Richmond Hill. You don't see, I mean, maybe you see porches on the front, but there's not a lot of play out there as far as people being able to utilize the fronts of their property just based on the fact that you're on a very steep hill, you're on a busy road because you're near the train station. You do have the train up there as well. And most people try to utilize as much of the rear of their property as they can, which is what the applicant has done. And when you go into the back of the property, what he tried to do is essentially flatten it, make it more flat so that he can utilize that particular area. He had the pool and he brought up the grade on the back of it as well. When they came out to do the CO and there were violations that looked like they may have occurred, the zoning town planner came out and said, listen, that's going to be considered a sports court. You're going to need to get a permit for that or a variance for that, or you're going to have to take the sports court out. It also appeared to not be within the drainage policy itself. So a new drainage plan had to be put together in order to essentially hold this water. And I think we're at a 100-year storm now. I do have Tom Quinn on the phone from Peak Engineering to answer any of those engineering questions. It was a significant amount of money that needed to be spent as well on basically bringing this property up to speed with the drainage policy in New Canaan itself. This is looking back out from sort of where you would enter this backyard of the property. So you can see here the exit to the property. You see kind of the steepness there. And once again, the applicant obviously was not going to utilize the front of this property for a basketball court. It's just not safe. I don't think anybody uses the front of their properties on Richmond Hill until you get up more towards the top of the hill beyond, and I'm trying to blank on the road at the top of the hill, but
Weed?
no, what's the
Marshall
Ridge.
Ridge.
Marshall Ridge. Right beyond Marshall Ridge, you start to see people using the fronts because it's flat again. So here's looking back into the court. So here's the area in the back of the property this is looking out one way, and then here's looking towards the court itself. And you see how the court is sort of nestled into this corner here to the south of the property. This is a portion of the stone wall, and there's a retaining wall actually kind of under this fence right here. It raises up about 1 foot on the property. It's just a little bit closer picture of it, just to show you sort of the extent of it to a certain extent. There's an area back in this corner here that we are removing that is within the setback, the rear yard setback that we are removing, which I will show you on the plan itself. Here's a picture back looking across towards the street. This is Richmond Hill right here. Once again, just a little bit farther back from Richmond Hill. And this is looking back up towards the neighbor above them on Richmond Hill. And you can see that the retaining wall was placed here as well to sort of stabilize that area and flatten it out of the property. Now, just to recall, the retaining wall rules that came in 2005, one of the reasons they wanted them brought off the property was based on the fact that the rationale for that was that they didn't want people building up their properties so that, in fact, the property was much higher on the top and then looking down on their neighbors. So it's not really the case this particular time. It's not as if he's built this property up or the retaining wall to look over something. It's the opposite. The retaining wall is sitting there to give him more of a flatter surface and to protect himself from additional runoff from the property to the west. This is looking back out towards Mead Park. You remember there's a driveway that comes across Mead Park. This is the egress from Mead Park. And this is looking back up from Mead Park. So if I'm standing where kind of the pond is here, this is looking back up towards the house itself. And you can see the fence there and maybe a little bit of the stone wall underneath.
David, if you go back 2 or 3 slides,
Yeah.
one more. Okay, let's say they just extended the driveway, which I assume they could do along the side of the house to this court.
This driveway.
Yeah.
Yes.
Let's say it just goes longer.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, people basketball hoops in their driveway all the time. No one thinks of it as like a sports court. I mean, at least at the times we've previously seen sports courts, like a tennis court, it's like an enclosed area when it's come up.
Yeah, I mean,
And I mean, this is really on the line. I mean, it's painted, it looks like a court, does it have a fence around it or not? I mean, the fence around it seems to me to be more of a fence so someone doesn't fall over the wall than like the fence you would see on a tennis court or another athletic court. The white fence is the same white fence that goes around the whole property. I mean, when you read the definition, that's why I was looking for it. I mean, they talk about something that includes a full or partial enclosure protecting the playing area.
So I just
I
want
mean,
to.
maybe this is a partial enclosure, but
I just want to also add that the other regulation that was a concern to staff is on page 53, section 34B4, non-illuminated outdoor recreation facility. And it specifically required 34B4, non-illuminated outdoor recreation facility. It specifically requires that it complies with all yard and other applicable regulations.
so
I think that brings you back to, is this or? I mean, because otherwise I feel like there's a lot of fact patterns where people have hoops in their driveways, and I don't know at what point, like I'm saying, this is really like a lot, it's much more than you would normally see in a driveway. It's painted, it's a different material, but it has a fencing on sides of it, so I guess it is partially enclosed. But I think, to me, at least thinking of a court, I would usually think of something that's like intentionally enclosed.
I mean, from our perspective, had we come in with this earlier, had we come in before it was built, we would have, essentially had to come in front of this commission and ask for relief from that particular regulation, which is why we're here today. We don't believe that in and of itself, this would have been something that the board wouldn't have entertained as far as being, being able to use a portion of your property on a narrow lot when you have a topography drop off like they do in the front of the yard, where you don't really have the ability to put in your standardized basketball court. I mean, even the courts that I'm seeing nowadays that are just on your driveway, people are painting them. They're painting out all the lines, they're painting out 3-point lines. Is it like this? No, but it's not unlike this in a lot of people who are into basketball. And like I said, from our perspective, it didn't seem like this was not me, but the applicant's perspective, didn't seem like this was going to be anything different than the tennis courts that are right up against their property in the back. So that was sort
Visited a
of,
moment ago before the meeting.
I'm sorry?
I just stopped by a moment ago before the meeting. And it is illuminated though, and I mean, visiting it, that does seem like
So that is a violation of the regulations, and they do require a special permit or to remove the light. So that is something we've brought up.
I mean, it was dark when I was there and it was all lit up.
It was a spring break sale and the light came with the hoop for like an extra $100, but I'm happy to take the light off.
Well, it's also blue lighting along the edge too, along the.
Oh, that's just, no, those are all solar lights. I can, those are all removable. I can put them anywhere on the property. Those are from Amazon. They're like $5 each.
Well, some of the items that we are requesting, that we are going to be removing from the violations is there was a shed on the property line to the west that we're taking down that will now be coming out of compliance. It'll be in compliance now because it won't be there anymore. We are willing to remove, obviously, the light. There was initially, one of the things that we were thinking about doing before we realized that the court was actually within the setbacks was to go to the special permit board and request a special permit for lights. You can actually do that. Right now, you can't do that. And we'd obviously be willing to obviously waive any rights that we have to do that. If it was a condition of any approval to remove the lights, we would do that. We're also removing the rear area here, which is in the setback. Not sure why my cursor's, oh, there we go. This area we're taking out as well in here, which is near the setback. But in order to basically build this court or build a court in and of itself, if you were going to have to comply with the setbacks, you wouldn't have a court. It would be way too thin, which is the request. I mean, the request is that in this particular area, it's not practical to build a basketball court. It's not, in the sense, it's too dangerous for us to have a court in there. And that's why the sports court was located in the back of the particular property.
David, I have a quick question. This is
Sure.
Jessica Carden for the record. When the applicant was putting the plans together for the house and pool, was there thoughts to do the sport court at the same time?
So my understanding is the house was built before and then he purchased the house and the pool was there and then he put in the sports court.
Okay,
So it was a third step.
Because unfortunately, I think the question I'm grappling in with is whether or not a sport court is a reasonable use of the property for which a hardship would have to exist. So, it is a smaller size lot. It is rather unusual for a lot that size to have both a pool and a sport court, and obviously the shed, which is being removed. And I say that as a fellow smaller lot owner in this town. So I think I'd like to hear the rationale for why that would be, something that we could justify would even meet the necessary or reasonable use of the property.
So had we come in beforehand, and the argument is the same argument that we would make today, that yes, we're trying to utilize the back of our property for recreational use because we really can't use the front of our property for recreational use just based on where it is on Richmond Hill. So the argument, as far as reasonable goes, is that we want to be able to use as much of our property for recreational use as we can. We don't think it's unusual request to have a basketball court. Of course, you can look at you could put a much smaller court in, you could just put a basketball hoop in. I understand that argument as well, so does the applicant. But from our perspective, we think it's reasonable to have raised the level to make it a flat yard, to be able to enjoy this property, which is a smaller lot. It's only 70 feet narrow. It is on kind of the edge of the hill. As far as it being unique near the park itself, the Mead Park itself, it's not as if that type of a use in and of the area is anything different than what's happening there today in their neighborhood. So their property is different to a certain extent than other properties in the area. And we think it is reasonable to be able to have a court in that particular piece of property in the rear yard with some limitations, obviously. But had we come in without, it wouldn't have been an application, at least that I would have said, well, no, that's not something you can ask for, because we are trying to utilize the back of our property.
Well, that's possibly true. We probably would have asked for other accommodations, like a restructuring, a repositioning of the sport court, or maybe rethinking it like Luke has proposed, where if it was an extended driveway situation, perhaps there would have been an accommodation. You've been before us many times to know that if it was constructed, we would have probably tried to work with the applicant, as would the town personnel, to try to come up with a solution. So I think that's the challenge here, because
I'm not even past Natasha speaking. I'm not even convinced that there's that this is a sports court. I mean, if it was just on the, it just seems so common to me to have a basketball hoop on a driveway.
I mean,
Oftentimes with like walls and things
I
around. it. The
disagree.
question is like
It
what
looks
point?
like a sports
Because
court.
of how
I
it's
mean,
painted, but let's assume it wasn't, it was just like a driveway longer and it wasn't painted that way. And it had a hoop there. We wouldn't call it a sports court.
I
You know,
think
so does
it,
the painting it to look like a sports court? I mean, it's not the full size of a
but
basketball.
you had
court. It's
already
very small.
indicated earlier, it also has a different surfacing material and then it's partially enclosed.
I don't know
So
if
I
it's enclosed, is what
disagree.
I'm
I
saying.
think by the definition, it is.
I don't think it is
Meeting it.
enclosed is what my view is that the fences aren't enclosing the court, they're enclosing the property. Like, I think if a court is like something for paddle tennis, something, you know, for regular tennis, like it has a fence around like the playing area, like to hold the ball in. I'm sorry?
You saw that it's all by code.
I know.
The fencing across of it, and then you could just put up gates if you wanted to enclose the whole court, if you wanted, and you guys.
I know what I'm saying, the fencing there is not to enclose the court, it's because you have like a retaining wall someone would fall over.
Well, I think that basketball courts in and of themselves are difficult to manage in general, because they are usually on the property lines, no matter what. Now, it's usually on your driveway. So you don't think of it as something that court is, you know, right up against a property line and not within the setbacks because you see it so often. You know, we're basically trying to take the front of our property where we could have done something like this, where we have pavement on the front of our property where the driveway is, and we want to do it in the back of the property. I mean, that's essentially what we're trying to do. Yes, we'd love to have a basketball court that we could have put in the front of the property, that we wouldn't have had to actually, you know, make it, utilize it for a basketball. And we're trying to do it in the back of the property because we don't think we can do it in the front of the property based on the topography of the property and the grade change and being so close to the road. So, you know, I understand the chairman's argument, and you know, sports courts are difficult when they're not tennis or paddle or pickleball because they're just different, you know, like this is a different type of court. You know, to follow your line, I'm not arguing it's not a sports court. I mean, I'd love to argue it's not a sports court, but I am saying that I think that it's difficult with basketball courts in and of itself, just because of the nature of them and where they are. And to what you're talking about, Mr. Chairman, where, yeah, you can put that anywhere in the front of your property. You can put it right up against your property line. Most people have them right against the property lines. Our item is that we can't do that in the front of our property.
I'm sorry, excuse me, this is Alex Snyder. I thought that most properties that I've seen, the driveways are subject to the setback. And when the basketball is there, it is also in compliance with setbacks.
No, driveways do not have to be, depending on what zone you are, sometimes they have to be 3 feet away, the driveway when it starts.
Yeah.
But
It's always 3 feet
yeah,
in every zone. Driveways can be up to 3 feet to the property line. And typically what staff has done in the past is if someone, you know, puts a basketball hoop in their driveway, even if it's only 3 feet from the property line, we wouldn't consider that a sport court, but we felt that this, you know, met that standard.
The 3 feet's not the setback, the 3 feet is just for like the driveways.
Mhm.
So the driveway's still in the setback. The only time I remember a basketball hoop ever coming up was someone had one and they had like a wall behind it, David. I don't know if this was one of your clients, but they had like a wall behind, like a wooden wall they built. And the kids would kick the ball against the wall and stuff too. And there was a question about whether or not that wooden wall behind the basketball court
that's
was a
not.
structure. And I remember we decided it wasn't a structure. I don't quite remember the rationale, but
Well, you
I
have
don't
to,
ever remember someone challenging a basketball hoop in a driveway, but this is, like Jessica was saying, it does look like, it looks like a court.
Yeah.
You know, but at the same time, I feel like it's in this ambiguous area where it's, what is a court?
yeah, and to Mr. Snyder's point, even if we had it 3 feet off the property line, it would still have to be 8 feet where you put the basketball hoop, at least in this particular zone. So to comply with the setbacks, you know, they're still really going to be within the setbacks, even if you're 3 feet off. And most driveways, yes, if you're building a new today, you got to be 3 feet off. But a lot of the homes around here, the driveways are right up against the property lines. And you see courts like that. And then to Mr. Tashin's point, yeah, we've had applications before where you'll have like a backboard, you know, like people hit the ball against the tennis
That's what I was
backboard,
thinking.
and then they'll have a hoop on top of that. Yeah, and then there's been issues with whether or not those are courts or not. I'm not sure honestly how staff has treated those in the past. I have not been involved in any of those, but obviously I've seen them, you know, in a lot of different properties. But, sorry.
I'm just gonna ask a quick question about the water
Yeah.
drainage issue. Has that been fully remediated? I believe you said that there was possibly someone on the line who might speak to that. Where is that at? Because I felt like we were
Sure.
waiting for an update.
Right, and then the status, I noted a PVC pipe coming out of the backyard going into the park, right? Is that allowed?
Let me have Tom
Yep.
Quinn, who's,
Yep.
who's on the line to just run through the drainage, Tom. And, you know, essentially how we got here is once staff came out and saw the sports court and they were like, well, wait a second, you need to comply with drainage policy now. So that's when Tom was brought in from Peak Engineering. He can run through what he's done for this particular property. Tom, could you run through that for me? Do you want this picture?
Yeah, this picture's great. My name's Tom Quinn. I'm with Peak Engineers. My office is located at 4 Old Mill Road, Reading, Connecticut. I am a licensed professional engineer for the record. Yeah, I was brought in because I had some knowledge of this property. I was brought in to design a drainage system with the facilities that would meet the drainage policy of the town of New Canaan. As you know, it changed to the 100-year storm, as David mentioned. So when I looked at this, we already have, David, if you'd point, we've got the existing house and the garage and the driveway that drains to that gallery system in the front yard. So I was tasked with designing something that would effectively catch and convey the rear flagstone patio, the pool area, and the so-called sports court, so that we would capture that water and meet the town's drainage policy. So I designed that system there. It's got four gallery units right behind the house, right where David's pointing, 16 linear feet of 4x4 gallery. The soil in this area is beautiful bank run sand and gravel. So I prepared the drainage plan that you're looking at. I prepared a drainage report, submitted that to Maria, the town engineer, back on September 6th. She has approved the plan. She says that the report and the plan meets the town drainage policy for the peak runoff, the volume of runoff, and also the water quality requirements that the town drainage policy has set forth.
Yeah, Tom, Rich Caratu. I noticed this PVC pipe coming out of the rear going into Mead Park. Is that allowed?
It depends if it was predated any activity. I'm not sure which pipe you're looking at. I don't think I know of one. Are you talking about the south? Like I would imagine.
Yeah, so facing.
Up here?
Yeah, looking at that picture, well, the first, facing the back of the house, lower right-hand corner. So if I'm in Mead Park property and I'm right in the backyard of this house, the fence, lower right-hand corner, there was a PVC pipe and I did note some water dripping out, you know, when I was there last month.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with Rich.
Okay.
But
That is from, sorry, Tom.
Yeah.
Sorry, Tom. That is from the pool that was approved from the automatic cover. That water drains out from the automatic cover to that system. And that was approved by the town. Because the pool was done prior to me, so
Okay.
that is from the automatic cover where the water drains in there.
But I would, again, I would find it highly unusual you would be allowed to drain water from you.
Yeah, so it's typically not allowed. I'll have to check with the town engineer to understand what may have happened, or because Attorney Rucci is correct that if there were something pre-existing,
Then,
it would be permitted, but typically that is not permitted. So I'll have to check with the town
Okay.
engineer.
I think we could offer right now. I mean, that water usually is a minimal amount of water and it's only.
yeah,
So we could tie that into that gallery system. I'm sure the gallery system can more than handle the amount of water coming off that cover.
should we ask it what any neighbors think? I mean,
Well, when they're done.
yeah, okay.
Just one of the other items, you will see within the portal that we'd put together 3 landscape plans, but I was talking with Tom this morning, and actually the town would rather us not do any of this landscaping based on the fact that it's technically would be on their property, and Public Works doesn't want to have to maintain it if for some odd reason we don't maintain it. So just disregard the three options that we've given you. If you do find yourselves able to approve this application, this would not be part of it. There was a comment though from Maria Coppola that we would put veneer on the stone wall. I guess it comes up like about 1 feet, and she wants it, that was one of the suggestions, that the stone wall be veneered, which is acceptable to the client. You can actually see in this picture of that light would be removed. So
Which light?
see this light?
Yeah, that's the one I saw.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So it's in your application, but we're not actually bringing that forward as any.
So which, on the plans, which wall's the veneered wall?
I think it's gonna be right in here. It's gonna be right under the fence. There's a wall that you look up at. It's about 1 foot. Is that right, Tom?
Yeah, in order to support the sport court, basically I would say there's a foundation wall supporting it and that extended down below the fence. So if you're standing 15 feet or so on the east side of that fence looking up the hill, you'd see a concrete, about 1 foot of concrete. So my conversation with Maria this morning simply said that she would rather see that, or I should say, I think it was somebody from the Parks Commission who said they want that veneered rather than a planting done.
So that's the easterly side, southeasterly corner.
Yes.
Okay, Rich carried you a question. So from the garage doors, looking at that picture exactly, from the garage doors to the Belgian block or cobblestone, whatever you call it, how many feet is it about? 30?
No, from there, oh, sorry, it's 3 foot grade and it's about 30 feet.
Okay, so one could argue you could put some type of pole basketball court like in between the two garages, and wouldn't that be ample room to play basketball? Or am I old fashioned?
It's gonna roll down that hill there.
Yeah,
Yeah,
the thing for us when we were debating about doing this is we have 2 young boys who don't tend to listen, so they were gonna run after those balls,
Yes.
and the park
Okay.
wasn't something we were.
yeah.
That
Okay.
front yard's very uneven.
Yeah, no, it is, Irene. Yeah. Okay,
Yeah, so that's right about, I think that's right about 30 feet. You're right.
yep, okay, but
Right in here.
slope of it makes it difficult.
It has the same slope in the backyard.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
This is Alex Snyder. So I understand the Mead Park, the town is the eastern boundary. Is there a neighbor on the south boundary, or is that also the town?
There is a neighbor on no, the town is on the south, and then on the west, there is a neighbor.
Yep.
That's
But the south is also the town.
yes,
Yeah.
so here's your west neighbor. Their house sort of is more on the same line as on the front yard as as this house is. As well. And this is the sheds this is the shed that's being removed on the property. I'm just trying to find, and then this area in the back is what's also being taken out, essentially from this little area back here. So that would be brought back outside the setback, outside the accessory setback.
And what do you call the surface of the court?
It's like a.
Like, didn't feel like asphalt, it was like softer.
The surface is, they are rubber tiles. Like a rubber plastic tile,
And what's under that?
concrete.
Okay.
So once again, our request is that we're essentially trying to take the front of our house, which we don't believe is usable for this particular type of a sports court, for a basketball court in and of itself, and essentially use the back of our property for recreational use. The hardship is the topography of the property. I mean, it has already been raised in the back. And we also have a smaller lot since it's narrow in the front, and the property in and of itself, the way it slopes in the front, makes it dangerous for us to try to utilize the front of the property, which is why we're trying to utilize the back of the property for recreation. the walls in and of itself providing extra protection for both drainage for us coming towards us, and then anything coming off the property towards Mead Park as well. We've actually tightened up that area. If you recall going by that area, you know, it could use some work. There's always stuff kind of falling down that little trestle into the parking area and the road itself.
I'm sorry, and the pole, the basketball pole itself is outside the setbacks. It's the
Yes.
Court surface.
Yeah, the pole is outside, the light is not allowable without a special permit. But the pole itself is outside, yes. The issue would be that if you tried to cut it here, if you tried to bring it in 8 feet to there, it's not really conducive to having a court. You would have a very small, I mean, we looked at it, I forgot how much it was, because we were, that's the
Rich,
first thing we talked.
are the inner circles, are they standard to like NBA's? Is there some type of standard circle like that in the circle of the court, right? Is that, did you do that? To
So
a
the
particular
foul line, the
standard?
foul line, or
The foul line?
the black thing, which one? are you
No,
talking
no, the yellow circle, so.
3-point line, I mean,
out
the
here.
free throw line?
Yeah, the
I
three.
mean, the foul lines, they're 12, 10 feet,
15.
15 feet.
And those are college regulation.
Okay. No, I mean, I just.
You're saying the 3-point in the free throw line.
Free throw line is 15 feet from the beginning part of the baseline. And the 3-point line is 21.5 feet.
Okay, from the court.
But we're saying those are normal court dimensions, or is that condensed?
Those are normal court dimensions. That is a half court considered court. Yes, I would have loved to have had an extra 10 feet back, but no,
Okay.
that 3-point line is college regulation. And it doesn't go, it matters. It's not as wide as a typical court.
Yeah, it comes up right against you.
Yeah.
So it's really just from this little area and this little area.
I mean, again, Rich character, one could argue that, that's why I asked the regulation. If this was being done beforehand, maybe, you know, I would have brought up, okay, you can't have the 3-point, you know, foul line, but the 15 foot. I mean, you can't have, yeah, the 3-point line, but the 15-point, you know, because not everyone that has a basketball court has the luxury of a, you know, of a 3-point line, right? I mean, if I'm just playing,
Well, I mean, yeah, depending on your driveway, I mean,
depending
Most of
on you know, your love for basketball and, you know, I mean, most people in New Canaan, you know, I would venture to say 80% of the people who have basketball courts on their driveway don't have the exact measurements of the NBA or the college
You don't
standards.
paint it on your driveway, but I
Right.
mean, most of his driveways are more than 15 feet deep. I mean, this is not, 15 feet's not a big area.
Right.
15 feet, I mean, I'm no good at any sports, but I could still throw it from that line up to there. You're probably no better than me, so don't chuck it.
I was on the basketball team.
Could have fooled me.
15 feet is obviously generally your foul shot. So, you know, that would be something you would want to have on a court at the very least. For, you know, any size court, that's where you're always measuring from.
I mean, the other benefit to the applicant here is it's a road on the other side of that fence. It's the exit from Mead Park.
Yeah, I mean, we don't believe like the use in and of itself is really going to negatively affect anybody in the neighborhood. You know, the light may, which is why that's something that we would remove, but, you know, and also don't forget on this end here, right here, there's tennis courts, you know,
Well, but
2 feet from that.
But David, they're aren't they more than 2 feet? There's a whole bunch of
Those are
gra-
far.
Those are far.
no, the back fencing though is there.
Oh.
So,
It's about 8.5 to 9 feet from my fence line.
Yeah.
For the tennis courts. We get tennis balls in the pool all the time. That's
Okay.
I mean, I could easily imagine with the lighting though becoming a problem to the neighborhood.
mhm.
So Alex Snyder, just an additional question, looking through our memo. Separate from the sports court, do we have an issue though with the setback on the fencing and the retaining wall?
That's the other issue. Yep.
And to be clear, those were constructed after you bought the home separately, correct?
Correct. So when the house was bought, the retaining wall by the house was completed based off of whatever analysis you guys had to do. And not knowing what I didn't know, I was like, okay, I'll just extend that, but I'll keep some of my property line based off of what I can keep. So that's why where you see the shed, it kind of goes in like a foot and then you have the rest of the retaining wall going. But that was already there based off of what was required of the town for the house. I don't know what the reason was, but that was required.
So the retaining wall went up to the shed and the portion
It went past the
is
shed.
new?
Yep,
Where did it go to before?
it ended and didn't really like the look of it
At the shed?
at the end of the shed, yep.
So we did not sign off on any retaining walls being closer than 8 feet to the property line. I did inspections and had an as-built survey, so I just want to be clear, because the shed is 4 feet, I think, from the property line, so there was never a retaining wall closer than 8 feet, which is
Correct.
required.
I'm saying I moved it in, just not knowing what I didn't know, but I moved it in, we're there, so I had extra property next to the pool, truthfully,
So you moved it in on the southwesterly end, that's what I'm,
towards the park. Yes. I moved it towards the park.
David, could you show us on the plans, the wall that was moved?
So on the, yeah, sorry, I don't, do you want to?
No, go ahead.
So
Which
on
ones are-
page 4, I guess you could say, see where the generator is and you see where the shed is? Page 4, sorry.
Yeah.
Shed to the southwest, 2/3 way down. You could see where the retaining wall ended.
Right here?
Yep, and then I moved it in a foot and then just extended it all the way to the back of the yard because we started getting a lot of drainage and the mulch was starting to go into the yard and so. Yeah, that's why we did that. The mulch was sort of graded by almost 1.5 to 2 feet, and so a lot of it was just draining into the yard and it didn't make the yard look pretty or anything like that.
But why couldn't the wall stay 8 feet, like consistent with the existing wall?
It could have. I didn't know what I didn't know, but if I did do the 8 feet, you're losing, another 4 feet of extra area. And so I just said, how do I make sure that the drainage that I saw coming in stopped at a certain level and I got extra yard for the kids?
Counselor? Hardship?
The hardship would have been the topography and the drainage in that particular case. And also, like I said before, the retaining wall rule, the design of the retaining wall rule, it was not necessarily, it was really to keep properties from being too tall rather than from supporting backyards and the drainage there. So, yes, if he had done it again, he should have just left it in a certain spot and kept moving it that way.
How does your hardship apply though, when this was originally constructed at the 8-foot setback as properly? They probably had an assessment at the time by the town as to what was needed for a retaining wall to solve any drainage issues. So it sounds like the purpose here was more aesthetic than for any kind of functional use for drainage. So I don't see how your hardship of a topography issue actually ties in here and justifies building it out and closer to the line.
Well, I think that once they started to see the damage that was coming in from the water itself, they should have gone back and said, we need to redo this now, instead of just doing it. That's what they should have done, is they should have said, listen, we're getting a lot more water than we thought we were going to get. Maybe the plan that was done at the time, I don't know what was done at the time, but the plan that was done at the time obviously wasn't working. Or if it was working, they wanted to change it. And you're right, they should have come back and said, this is what we want to do. And they didn't.
The issue was the 45-degree slope you're saying where there's no wall? It wasn't the location of the wall. Like, why does this wall have to be so close to line, I think is the question that some of us have.
From what I'm hearing from the applicant was when they saw the drainage problems that was coming into their yard, they decided to extend the wall that way. And yes, they took additional liberty with respect to using the back of the yard. And it doesn't change our argument as to what we're trying to do in the back of the yard as far as using it as recreational space. And something that we believe is unique to this particular property. I mean, it doesn't change our argument. Doesn't mean it was right that it was done the first time. It doesn't change why we're coming to this particular commission for both retaining wall and for the court.
The advice I received was that based off of where the drainage was coming from, this was the right spot to hit so that the water didn't come down into the property. And that was the advice I got. So I said, okay, well, if I can conserve that, that makes sense to me, as long as I don't hurt anything else that I didn't know about the other 4 feet.
But those plans, they were probably drawn up to meet also your desire to have more space. So, I mean, that's again, the question we're grappling with a post, construction type of variance is we would have had the opportunity to work with you. If that was something that was revealed by an engineer, we could have worked with you to see and have the engineer do an assessment of, would it be 4 feet? Would it be 8 feet? Would it be 6 feet? And then you would have asked for the variance. So now we're having to figure out if what you're telling us is true without actually seeing an engineer report that backs that up.
Okay.
I'm not, Lukasevich, I'm not having trouble ascertaining if it's true or not. I think the issue is ascertaining the hardship. I mean, if you're wanting more space, it's not a hard, at least maybe your attorney could say otherwise, but it would seem that the desire to have another 4 feet of space here is not a hardship that necessitates the granting of a variance.
Well, it's.
And there's a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, you got the court, which maybe you can see a little bit of gray there. This, maybe some do, but I mean, there's a lot going on. It's like every millimeter there is an issue, it seems. You got the pipe running out one way, you have the wall showing, there's a lot of like variables here moving.
Well, it's definitely all comes down to use and trying to get as much use as possible out of this backyard. There's no hiding that, and we're not trying to hide that at all. I mean, we're talking about a small lot on Richmond Hill where you can't really use the front of the property, and we're trying to use as much of the back property as we can.
But the question is not maximizing the use, because then there'd be no zoning. The question is reasonably necessary use. And is there something that says you need this 4 feet to make a reasonably necessary use of your backyard?
Or a sport court.
Yeah, no one's said anything yet on the reasonably necessary. I mean, I think having a basketball hole in your yard, to me, seems like a very typical, reasonable thing. I don't know at what point does it become a court that requires a variance or not. But, and there's some positive factors they're going for you, I think. On this wall issues, there's been no testimony yet as to why this is reasonable and necessary
For
for the wall.
For the walls.
Yeah, was there an engineering assessment done before this wall was constructed? Or was it just constructed? I mean, I think for me to feel like that was actually something where you could argue a hardship and that it was reasonably necessary, I would need to know why an engineer felt that positioning of it was necessary. What underlying issues were you trying to remediate with the property for building the wall out? Because right now, I'm just under the impression that it was an aesthetic extension and that you were desiring to gain a little bit more backyard space, which isn't a necessary reason. While desirous, maybe as the property owner, it's not something that I feel is legally justified at this point without understanding more about the underlying reasons and issues with the land.
I think Jessica's not Lukasevich. I think just saying like her opinion on what is legally justified. She's saying we're confined to where we can grant a variance. It's not like we have a personal opinion here on what's a good use and a bad use. It's, a legal standard.
I need
And
to
this is like-
understand like an assessment about 4 feet versus 8 feet, basically. Like, I don't feel there's enough presented here for me to say yes or no either way. I'd want to understand that piece of it from someone who has the technical knowledge that I do not have to present that to me.
I mean, I think that'd probably be the general view of most people here,
Mhm.
is that if an engineer came in and said, this wall can only be constructed here, or you're gonna have, issue A, B, C, and D, and you can't put your pool in, you can't use your backyard, it's gonna be full of water, whatever.
Well, I think,
But the 4 versus the 8 feet,
yeah, and
without any testimonies to why you can't otherwise use your backyard.
Yeah, and I believe that this board did look at that issue once before on a property where we came back with an engineer who described why they had made that change.
Correct, we've done that.
And I
before.
forgot where that was right now.
We allowed that variance.
Spring water. And I don't think that Tom, Quinn at Peak had done all that necessary stuff before because he came in after the fact. So I don't know if he can opine to that now. We certainly would be willing to come back with something from an engineer who would look at that and try to give this commission some comfort into why we're requesting it, if we can.
I mean, perhaps, obviously, one thing might be because if we can't grant the variance for it, obviously it would have to be either removed or reconstructed somewhere.
Yeah.
So maybe the engineer can evaluate the consequences of removal or reconstruction as well, because well, you can't really sort of go back in time. None of us have the Back to the Future or Back to the Past car. You can at least try to explain to us what might happen for your property and for neighboring property if that change were to take place.
I just want to remind the board that, self-created hardships, though, on the other hand, are not.
I know, but I don't want them to manufacture something that wasn't there in time. So to me, if you can at least try to look at the 4 through 8, foot differential in some way where we can understand the consequences here.
Yeah, I don't, like Sarah was saying, I don't think the hardship of moving this is something
I
that
understand
would
that.
be heavy. I think the issue is if the wall was 8 feet, would it somehow deprive you of reasonable use of your backyard? I think that's the fundamental question here. And in that case you're thinking of, the issue was the runoff was coming in and there was no way to stop the runoff besides putting the wall where it was with the ground that way to have the runoff go that way. And their engineer testified as to that. I mean, if an engineer came in and testified and said, you can't use your backyard unless this wall is right here, that's a different.
If I could speak to that for a minute. So I believe, and the applicant will correct me, I believe I was brought in near the end of the construction to help with the pool grading plan. That's what I seem to remember. And when I was looking at this, somebody mentioned a 4-to-1 slope. The historic grade coming down west to east was basically a 4-to-1 slope, maybe a little bit steeper. So I remember looking at this and saying, okay, we want to put a pool in the backyard. And I brought up at the time, the water's going to be flying down from the neighbor and it's going to be coming down and it's going to be a hard thing to address without the water and the leaves and the mulch flowing right into the pool. And we did discuss it at the time. We didn't discuss extending the wall or an optimal location for the wall, but seeing the wall that it was built, I'm not surprised. I do think it is of immense benefit to the grading around that pool and for the drainage, because it took what was a slope. It created the drop. I think that wall's about 3 feet tall, and it leveled out the area between the wall and the pool so that you wouldn't have the mulch and so forth running right into the pool. It allowed that turf that's back there. The turf has sand underneath it and gravel underneath it. Allows the water coming from the neighbor to be absorbed into the ground rather than running into the pool. So while we didn't discuss that during the application for that pool, we decided not to extend the wall at that time. I'm not surprised that it's been built since then. I do think it is an immediate and necessary benefit to the site.
But then if it had been extended at that point, it would have been extended 8 feet back, not 4 feet back. Is that correct?
That's correct. So the applicant mentioned where would optimally be located. So maybe where it is now was optimal. I would have to go back and look at what the way the site was, in 2022, I think it was when the house was built, or 2021. So that I couldn't discuss whether or not the 4 feet where it is now is better than where it would have been if just the 8 feet were extended. And I agree with what has been said with David, that if we thought that the 4 feet was better at the time, then we probably would have come in for the application. But I just, what I can speak to now is that it's definitely a benefit the way it is.
Well, you also have the issue that if you were going to build these stone walls 8 feet in everywhere around the property and hit the setbacks, you are really shrinking the rear of the property on a small lot. So you are losing more space if you're requiring to actually build to the 8 feet and not asking for any sort of relief from that particular rule. And once I said, like I said, the rule itself, was really designed more for a height issue, not necessarily for where its actual location was going to be. The location was based on the fact that that was going to help with height on other properties in and around you. But like I said, we can have Tom take another look at it and come back to the commission and determine whether or not what he's saying now is actually accurate once he looks at the plans itself from back in 22. If that's something Ms. Cardone
I mean,
and the
I
others.
think the other issue though is if the point is gaining more usable space, then if previously the prior owner never extended those retaining walls, then in a way you actually took away usable space by extending the retaining wall to the backyard further, but putting it 4 feet. So my understanding is that this was added on, correct? Like, so there was a point where it was stopped by the prior owner and then you built in a wall. So
Because there's a 4-to-1 slope, so it wasn't usable in the little area they're saying.
Yeah, the 4-to-1 slope.
talk about how slopes can be used in different ways. That might be the one spot the kids sled in the winter. Like, you can roll down grass. Like, I'm just saying, like, I'm not gonna put a assessment on what childhood brings to the table, but I think there was a different decision-making process at play here.
For us, it was minus the aesthetics, it was costing us a lot of money because filters were getting clogged with mulch and all of this other stuff that was coming from that. When you look at where the fence sits to where the pool actually is, it's about 10 feet high, based off of the slope. But that's the only, that's what directed us to do it. And didn't really, I was more told to do it.
I was gonna ask Tom, it could be helpful to see a topo map with contour just for like the neighboring property and the whole, the whole block kind of.
And there is a lattice underneath the the fence, and so when the parks guys would come and mow the lawn, all the grass would be kind of blown over, and whatever they do, it's what they do. It's like part of having the town as a neighbor.
Yeah, I think we can probably show the topo from at least the property next door, just based on what the wall is now and looking up it, we can just do a height analysis on that.
Cynthia Dell, is there a reason that the pool wasn't centered more in the backyard as opposed to close to that side of the property?
So I can
Where-
actually speak to that, because I signed off on the original building permits, I signed off on the CO, and I was the one that discovered the sport court, so I do have the whole history. The pool was actually proposed in a different location, and then the contractor during the construction process took the liberty of relocating the pool to this location, which we found out about during the CO process, and they maximized the setback, ensured everything was exactly 8 feet from the property line. That was the same contractor who built the pool on Woodridge Circle for the application you all likely remember. I don't know what the justification was for why the pool got relocated. It just showed up there when we came time to CO the property.
Does the pool itself comply with setbacks, including its deck,
It exactly meets the setbacks.
including the deck, which counts?
So the patio was not, if I recall properly, the patio was not constructed. When we signed off on the CO, there was no patio going to be part of the proposal, but it does meet the setbacks.
But if there's a patio that touches the pool coping, I thought that
Yes,
counted
but
as-
the way the patio is oriented, it doesn't
touch. the
It doesn't
coping.
violate
Okay, that's the question.
the setback.
I bought it after the pool guy.
Yeah, the only thing the applicant put in was really the court and extending the wall. The other items were there, the pool and the newly constructed house.
So if you don't have anything else to say now, why don't we see if there's anyone here for or against it?
Yep.
And then we'll let you come back and decide whether you want to continue it. If you have any more questions for us, I think you understand there's concerns about it's a kind of a big ask with this tennis court. Not the tennis court, this basketball court. I don't know what you can do to mitigate the ask there. But I think you understand there's a lot of concerns with this because it's atypical. And there's also obviously the concerns you heard about the wall and why there's something that runs with the land that necessitates it being located where it is. I think those are the two issues I've heard so far. Does anyone else here have another issue? No. So why don't we see if anyone's for or against, then you can decide if you want to continue it or proceed. Is there anyone here for or against this application? Do you have any letters of support from anybody?
No letters either way.
No.
So has there been any communication with the neighbor to the west?
Letters, knocked on the door, spoke. Doesn't seem, yeah,
No concern, and they would know about this here.
no. No. Actually, she was happy about the direction of the light and where it was.
So, Mr. Chairman, if I'm hearing correctly, it would be beneficial for us to come back with, to hold the hearing open, potentially beneficial for us to hold the hearing open to find out what the, whether or not the retaining wall and extension of it beyond the 4 feet and the setback, something that was in fact necessary or would have been necessary from a drainage perspective. And the second part is what, if anything, can be done to the sports court as far as taking it further away from the setbacks. Obviously, we've already agreed to remove the light. We have agreed to a small portion of the area of the sports court back here to already be removed. But what I'm hearing is that those would be two things that the commission would certainly want us to look into before you make a final decision on this.
And maybe circle back with Tom on just the PVC pipe.
On the
Whether the
PVC.
town is okay with it or not, or it could go into a galley. Since I noticed it.
In the facing of the wall,
I'm sorry?
the facing of the wall, putting a
Oh,
facing on it.
yeah, we would be
And
willing.
we're not gonna say what's beneficial or not. These are the concerns that I think you.
I understand. No, I understand, but those are things
That
that
the
we would
board
certainly want
has.
to look at.
And this is obviously a significant ask here, so.
So we would like to keep it open if the commission is agreeable to that.
Yes, I think you can do it as of right, can't they, Sarah? Yeah, you have a right to keep it open, so, but thank you for asking.
For the consideration.
Okay,
Welcome.
where's,
Thank you.
there you go.
We have to put these on. Give us that next one or?
Yeah, I'll come around. Let me just get this set up.
Thanks, guys.
Welcome.
You're welcome. All right, however.
Yeah.
Those two.
That is lost. Those are the- It's a good one. Hope they were bad. Should I announce that we're sitting Alex again.
If you allow it,
I think we should proceed with five members. Alex, do you mind?
No, it's fine.
Chad, we'll sit you the next one to start. You should run through
Yeah.
a hearing first before.
What's the?
Huh? No, you can,
Oh,
no, it just
sorry.
means like when we decide. So
So,
when you're not seated, you
yeah.
can, participate when we're open meeting. When it goes in a business session, only the people who are seated can comment. So if you have any comments, to say them before we go into business session. And then when we're in business session, like you wouldn't vote because you're not seated, but otherwise anyone can participate. Yes, want to proceed? So the next matter before us is appeal of order upon appeal of Todd Lampert, Tui and Rucci. Authorization for calling Sheldon and David Schwartz, owners of 115 Pastures Lane. Appeal of the zoning inspector's decision to issue a zoning permit while the subject property maintained violations of section 6.5 of the New Canaan zoning regulations located in the 2-acre zone at 78 Pastures Lane, map 44, block 109, lot 251, and 92 Pastures Lane, map 44, block 109, lot 252. Do you want to identify yourself for the record, please?
Todd Lampert from Lampert to Marucci, representing Colin Sheldon and David Schwartz with regard to the objection for the zoning inspector's decision to issue a zoning permit for lot 7892 Pastures Lane while the subject property were in violation of section 6.5. Give you my presentations.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner, committee members. Start off with this appeal of Pastures Lane. I just put up for everybody Pastures Lane. It's a partial look at the subdivision. And we have two specific items that we are addressing here. The first, if you can see my arrow here, is a fence that is located that goes down here and across. And the other one is a fence that starts over by this circle here and goes all the way down this road. Address the first one. Again, this is the fence line off of Pastures Lane. I'm not sure if any of you had an opportunity to go by the property, but if you're going to go down Pastures Lane, on the left side, you'll come up against this fence here, which is on the map right here. So as you're coming down Pastures Lane, fence goes there and across. And our position with regard to fence is that 6.5 C2 is basically what sets forth fence heights. 6.5 C4, A, B, and C are the exceptions to the fence heights. So our first argument is that the front yard setback in this area is 45 feet. If you take a look at the fence here, it starts at 23 feet from the road. So right off the bat, the distance between 23 feet and 45 feet, which is 22 feet, the differential is part of the front yard setback. And there's an 8-foot fence there, which just clearly violates 6.5 C4A. And C4A says that in the front yard, it needs to be either in a wooded area or a screened area with natural landscape. The back side here where they put trees in may be wooded and screened, but the other lot here, which is wide open to it, is not. So that area to us is not in a screened in area with a natural landscape. In fact, it's overly visible. Section B of 6.5 C4 states that it's got to be of dark color to blend with the natural landscape. Now, this picture was taken about a month ago when it was still light wooded posts there. Since then, they put dark posts, which we think are even more offensive because the dark posts do not go with the natural landscape of the area, and they're even more visible than the lighter ones were beforehand. And again, we don't think that section B fits in with the exception from 6.5 C2. Finally, section C says that in order to have an exception, the fence needs to be of open design such that it is not especially visible at a distance of 50 feet. when you drive down the driveway here, it's visible from 1 feet, 50 feet, or 100 feet, and it is especially visible. I think what the regulation intended to speak about is sort of black wire mesh fences that run a distance that sort of just blend with the natural landscape, not with big wooden posts of dark color that are meant for almost commercial use. But when you go down Pastures Lane, which never had fences before, and you take a look at this fence, it jumps out at you and it is offensive. The other part is, and which I find really interesting, if you take a look at the trees here that were planted by the owner of the property, he could have easily have put the fence on the other side of the trees. He elected to put it to the open part for a reason I don't know, because if you go further down, and I apologize to the board here that I don't have a front picture of it, but the fence in the front is behind the trees and you can't see it. But on the side, he left it open to the neighbor. Again, not sure why. I didn't cite 6.5C5, not sure if it's applicable, but I'm going to state it anyway. Basically, when you put a fence in, you're supposed to put the side that's most attractive to your neighbor. What he did was put the trees on his side and put the fence on the other side so that only the neighbor sees the fence, or whoever buys that lot sees the fence. Again, this could have been easily remedied by putting the trees on the other side and putting the fence on his side of the property if he was truly using it for deer fencing and wanted to be respectful of his neighbors. Not really happy with the decision that was made there. For those reasons, we think that that entire fence is in violation of 6.5C2 and does not fit any of the exceptions of 6.5C4A, B, or C.
Oh, Attorney Lampert, Luke Tashton, a moment. For an 8-foot fence, do you need a building permit?
To have an 8-foot fence, you have to comply with the zoning regulations, which is the exception, which is 6.5C4A, B, and C. Otherwise, you cannot have an 8-foot fence, or you can have a special permit if you wanted to do that. If you didn't fit under 6.5C4A, B, and C, you could then go for a special permit.
Not under the zoning regulations. I'm saying under,
You do not need a building permit for fences.
regardless of the height.
A zoning permit.
You asked specifically
No,
about
a building,
building.
I'm asking.
No, not a building
There is-
permit.
I
there is
thought
no
there was a height at which you needed a building permit.
No,
I'm not
there
aware
is,
of
there is no, the town of New Canaan doesn't issue building permits for fencing.
It's a zoning requirement.
I understand the zoning.
I'm not aware
was-
of a building permit requirement either. As I sit here today, Mr. Rucci might, if he comes back, and be more aware of it.
The second thing, coming down the road,
Yes.
I agree. This, you don't have to look for address signs. I mean, this really stands out as like the fence in question as you're approaching it. And you kind of just dismiss 6.5C5. But
I don't dismiss it. I think it's very relevant, but I think the other ones, A, B, and C, dispose of it. But
if you look at C5, your fence is on the inside of those poles. So they had a similar project going up Weed Street. On the left there, it's close to your house.
Yeah.
But they did kind of what they did in the front of this house here with the bushes in front, so you don't see the fence. And then the poles were rounded. It was a similar nature fence. It wasn't like the typical deer fence, which my understanding, as I would read this prior to this application, was when they discuss a deer fence, they discuss what you were saying, a typical black post with the vinyl mesh or the chicken wire
But you
or
can't really
something
see it.
like that. Because then if you're 50 feet away, like I have one of those in my house, if you're 25 feet away, you don't notice it. But other people in town, like going up Weed Street, they do have fences similar. It's not with the square posts, and the square posts kind of make it look prisonish. But with it being on the inside, Michael, and it looked to me like this was right on the line. Sometimes they put the fence a foot into it, the line.
this is
But if-
right on the line.
So what is with the good side facing in, which is, as I would read it, against 6.5C5, where you would always put the good side out. And it seems like that creates like a practical problem where they can't go on your property to maintain the fence. And the posts are big. They're not like the round ones on Weed Street. So maybe like 8x8s or 6x6s or some pressure treated dimensional lumber. So there's a post with a square and then the fence behind it. So there's gonna be like 8 inches of brush and stuff growing up there that no one can maintain because your guy can't maintain it because it's on their property. They can't maintain it because they'd have to go onto your property.
Chairman,
mean-
can I just make a request, just because I know Attorney Lampert still has more presentation. I know staff wanted to speak, and I believe the attorney representing the
You know,
homeowner
I
wanted to
was
speak.
commenting on
Could
the
we go
6
through everyone's remarks before we get too deep
Mhm.
into the?
Okay,
debate.
Keep going.
But yeah, again, my position is that would have been easily remedied by putting the fence on the inside of those trees. I wouldn't be arguing this point right now. And again, not sure why the front of the house, they put the fence on the inside, and on the side of the house facing the neighbor, they put it on the outside. But for all the reasons I set forth in 6.5, C4, A, B, and C, and 6.5, C5, I think the fence is in violation of zoning. The second argument that we make is claim 2, and that's, I'm just gonna go back here for 1 second. That deals with the access way where, must hit button, where the fence comes along the access way all the way down the road here to some other properties. And when you get to this, I think the best way to show this, the fence starts here, it's a deer fence to here, if everybody can see that, and then it goes to a full wooded fence here and all the way down, like that. So this is the deer fence, again, 8 feet high. This is a back lot, there's a 40-foot setback there. I would argue that the first 40 feet can be no higher than 4 feet over here, or 6 feet. And it's 8 feet, so that clearly has to be remedied. But as you go back further, we have the large wood fence going back here. This is our neighbor's driveway. And right in here, I'm going to argue something after about safety. So I just want you to remember this. I'm going to come back to that. But this back area where we have this fence is really, unfortunately, it's not coming up on the screen, on my screen. So comes down to an interpretation of where the front yard setback starts. The issue is whether or not the existing driveway, which is on Pastures Lane, dictates where the front yard is, or does the subdivision, which mandates that the driveway to the back lot be on the access way, dictate where the front yard setback starts. If you believe that the driveway is dispositive of the issue, then the front yard, I'll bring back to you here, then the front yard, excuse me here. If the driveway, which is right here, is dispositive of front yard setback, this would be deemed the front yard over here, and this down here would be a side yard. If you agree with me that the subdivision that was approved, which requires a driveway on the access way, is dispositive of the front yard, then I think the town planner would also agree that this would become the front yard. If this is the front yard, all the fencing is in violation of 6.5 C2 and does not fit the exceptions of 6.5 C4 A, B, and C. Now, let me go back to this. I think we're all in agreement that Pastures Lane 78 and 92 are legally subdivided. No issue there. They're taxed separately and they can be sold separately. No dispute there. As a condition of the subdivision, when Pastures Lane was subdivided, in order to transfer lot 92 or to sell it or work on it or build a house on it, you had to have a driveway that was on the access way. Nobody's going to dispute that has not been done yet, and the lots have not been merged yet. So they are two separate lots. So we go back to what controls. Our position is that the subdivision requiring the access way is dispositive of where the front yard is because it has to be. Because to interpret it differently would create an ongoing violation of the zoning regulations. And I'm going to give you an example. If they came today and tried to subdivide Pastures Lane and it wasn't done before, and that fence was there, sitting there, they may approve that subdivision, but a condition would be, just as you discussed with David before, and if you come in advance, the condition would be get rid of the fence because I can't give you a lot when the fence is already violating what you're asking for. So to allow them to do it after the fact just doesn't make any sense. The fence is there now, but at some point this lot has to be merged, and then maybe this rule goes away, or we have to enforce that one day there's gonna be a driveway there or a house there, and you can't allow a violation of the zoning conditions in advance of something when you know that the subdivision is sitting out there already approved. So my position is that entire area is the front of the property, and all of those fences violate 6.5 C2, and there is no exception under 6.5 C4 A, B, or C.
Attorney Lampert, Lee Tashin, one question on that. I know, Sarah, you want to speak, but I'd like to ask the questions as I go. You look at page 40 of the, I mean, maybe a different page. We look on a different definition of yard setback in the regulations.
Yeah, let me pull that up for a second. But you can keep turning it up.
And there's a picture of an access way there.
Yes,
And you look about halfway down the page, I mean, it says front lot corner, then it says front lot, then it shows the access way.
yes,
And then next to that front lot, next to the access way, it says side yard setback there.
yes.
Isn't that your fact pattern? Isn't that a side yard? It looks,
I don't even think the town planner would. No, here's the difference. The driveway on that front lot, because of the subdivision, you have to look at the subdivision that you guys approved. The subdivision requires the driveway to be off the access way, which changes this. So there is no map for what you've already approved under the subdivision.
can you go back to your plan?
Yeah, I'll go back to the map here. Let me go. So if you take a look down here, the subdivision, the driveway has to be here. So if this is the driveway, this has to be the front yard, and I do not think the town planner would object or counter that, but we could ask her later. Has to be.
I'm sorry, I'm confused with what you're
Okay.
saying here.
If the subdivision right now requires a driveway to be along this access way for this lot, it's a requirement. Okay, so if the driveway's here, if you take a look at the regs, this has to be the front of the property. It's dispositive. And this board's held that before, that on the access ways, that would be the front yard. And I don't think anybody's gonna argue that.
Okay, maybe we'll address that later, but, okay.
Just have one further argument, and this deals with, as we go down the back of the property towards the Sheldon house, this is a fence that you see right before the driveway. And then this is a view from the driveway, and if you could see, as the Sheldons exit their house, and the Schwartzes are back here, they have the same problem. This fence blocks all access sightline. When you take a look at 6.5C, one, it says no fence, I think it's 6.5C1, let me just. Yeah, C1 says no fence, post, column, wall, or portion thereof shall be constructed in a way as to obstruct corner visibility as required by 6.9 of the regulations at intersections of roads, driveways, access ways, or other travel. My position is that fence violates that section. And that fence is a danger. Other than that, I have nothing further with regard to my presentation, unless you have questions.
What, Sarah, do you want to go? And then we ask neighbors, or I don't know what procedure, and then,
So, I mean, do you want to hear from the homeowner's attorney who installed the fence before I speak, or would you like me to speak?
I mean, do you want to speak last, and then everyone else, I think I'll give them, they should get a chance to
Yeah, of
respond, and then
course.
we'll
I
ask
mean,
questions at the end. I just want to make sure everyone has.
Yeah, so you
Has
tell
adequate
me
time?
when, you tell me when you want me to speak.
And I just want to, by the way, just for the record, with me today is a bunch of the homeowners in this area. We have Mr. Sheldon, Mr. Schwartz, Mr. Chen, and Mr. Reed here. So I just wanted to put that on the record.
And if they won't, anyone here wants to say anything, they'll get an opportunity to. We always appreciate people coming and their input. But, so why don't we have the property owner present,
You want me
Could
to?
you just stop sharing your screen? Or do you want me to shut?
You know, stop.
Good evening. My name is Amy Zabatakis. I'm an attorney at Rucci Law Group. With me is Mr. Beldon, who is the member of the LLC that owns the property that is 78 and 92 Pastures Lane. I hope that you all had a chance to review the letter that I submitted in advance of the prior hearing. If not, I do have some extra copies I can share. I'm honestly a little confused by the order of tonight's hearing. Typically, in my experience, when we've had an appeal of the zoning officer's decision, the zoning officer actually presents first and presents what their decision was. But obviously, you can choose whatever order you want to proceed in. But I think we need to take a big step back and talk about what it is that we're doing here. So this is an appeal of a permit that was issued by your staff. This is specifically an appeal of a permit to install a driveway gate. I think we'll notice that there was nothing in the presentation that had to do with the driveway gate. And that is what is being appealed here today, is whether or not the zoning officer should have issued a permit for a driveway gate. That's it. No one seems to be alleging that they should not have issued a permit for a driveway gate, but the driveway gate itself complied fully with the regulations. So then the question is, what is it that is being appealed? So again, the zoning permit for the front entry gate was issued on July 11th. The appeal was filed within 15 days of them being noticed of the issue, receiving notice of the issuance of the appeal. I think it should have been filed within 15 days of July 11th, but obviously we're here, so there's been a determination that the appeal is timely. The standards for front entry gates are in section 6.5C3. Again, as I stated, there wasn't anything raised against the front entry gate. The Connecticut statute and the town's own regulations are clear that an appeal is only allowed from a decision of a zoning officer. There is no statutory right or other right for a neighbor to appeal the zoning enforcement officer's failure to enforce regulations. And that's precisely what you heard. They are attempting to ask you to force the zoning enforcement officer to find a violation on this property. That is not an appealable issue. It's not an issue that is properly within the jurisdiction of this board. They state in their appeal letter, the very first paragraph of the letter, they are appealing the town planner's failure to enforce code violations. They state at the end of the appeal, they ask that you issue a cease and desist and ensure that the property is brought into compliance. Those are not issues that are appealable under either Connecticut statute or your own regulations. I do think that what this is an attempt to pull the town and this board into what is otherwise a private land use litigation between these parties. A lawsuit has been filed against my clients, alleging that they're in violation of alleged restrictive covenants. I will say that I'm not involved in representing my client in that litigation. That's being handled by the title insurance company. But I will say that is the appropriate venue for these arguments to be hashed out and, perhaps a settlement issued. But the town is not a party and should not make itself a party to that litigation. Your staff has taken extra time to evaluate these properties. They have really worked very hard with the property owners to make sure that everything I know that the full record was made part of the documents in front of you. You can see a significant amount of email traffic between Ms. Carey and Mr. Baden, asking exactly what needs to be done on the property, what would be appropriate, what is within the regulations. The posts, for example, were originally going to be allowed to weather so that they got darker over time. Ms. Carey asked that they be painted this darker color to greater blend in with the property, just as one example. So a lot of work has been done and your enforcement officers have been involved along the way. And asking, it is not within your jurisdiction to oversee their decision on how to enforce the regulations and their decision that what was done was appropriate. The only thing in front of you is whether or not it was appropriate to issue a permit for the driveway gate. Now, if you have specific questions, I can speak to some of those other issues that were raised by Attorney Lambert, but like I said, I don't think that those are properly before the board.
Do you have any specific arguments you'd want to put forth as to why, or any grounds they're arguing in favor of the appeal with respect to the driveway gate? So if presumably, since that is the appeal for us, is there anything you'd want to present in favor of your client where we shouldn't, overturn the granting of the, I guess, allowance? I'm not even sure what the term was, what was granted for the driveway gate, but the approval, I guess.
So a zoning permit was issued. So to the question of whether what you need building permits for and zoning permits for. A building and zoning permit was required for the driveway gate. And the driveway gate complies fully with the zoning regulations and the building permit was issued. It is, I don't know if you did get a chance to go by, but there was, again, part of this is also, we have to understand this is a work in progress. The landscaping is still going in. So as an example, there was a requirement that some additional trees be put in front of the driveway gate before the CO would be issued. That was done.
Counselor, Luke Tashton for the record.
Mhm.
I agree, and that's a question that, I think I anticipated being addressed tonight, is what's the decision being appealed? But assuming there is a decision and assuming that a statement that they're going to refuse to take action is a decision, then would you want to address the merits of their claim? Or are you just saying, I'm not going to even address the points they raised because you don't believe they're standing?
I mean, I'm happy if you would like me to speak to those, I will. But I guess I want to be very clear that I'm doing so under the pretense that, not under the pretense, that's not the word I meant to say, but with the acknowledging that they do not have standing to raise those issues. And I will say specifically, the decision not to issue a cease and desist is not, you may refer to that as a decision, but that is not considered a decision under Connecticut law. The Connecticut statutes are quite clear. I'll read the language specifically. They can appeal any order, requirement, or decision of the official charged with the enforcement of the zoning regulations. That's the language that's in the Connecticut statute and in your regulations. Failure to enforce regulations is not an appeal, is not a decision, and it's not an appealable decision.
But then there's case law on that. It's not as black and white as that statute.
There is case law that says that the failure, an alleged failure of the zoning enforcement officer to enforce zoning regulations is not an appealable issue to the Board of Appeals. There are other avenues. For example, you can bring a private zoning enforcement action, again, but that's in Connecticut Superior Court. As far as what is, you are created by statute, this board. So your jurisdiction is limited to the items that are given to you by statute. So your statutory purview does not include an alleged failure of the zoning enforcement officer to enforce zoning regulations.
So back to my question, you might disagree with this, but I'm not under the impression that you addressing their claims would constitute a waiver of your objection to the board having jurisdiction. So if you want to address their claims,
Sure.
I think it may be helpful in case the board decides that there is an appealable decision. It's your decision whether or not you want to, but
Sure, I'm happy to just sort of quickly run through a couple of the items that are before the board. that were raised by the applicant's attorney. Like I said previously, this is still a property that is being worked on. My clients bought the property in January and have engaged in quite a bit of work, landscaping, redoing the house on the property. And more trees are on order. They're hoping to get them in so that they can be planted this planting season. But as we know, that window is going to be closing shortly. As far as the.
Actually, they're arriving tomorrow.
Oh, they are, good, okay. Sorry, when we last spoke, he wasn't sure when they were going to get here, but so there will be more trees planted within the next few weeks. As far as the deer fence, so that first part, which was the view from the neighbor's property. That neighbor is not part of the litigation. That neighbor is not part of any of the gentlemen that are sitting behind me here today. That property will be developed. There are plans on file for the development of a house on that property. And that neighbor has no problem with the fencing that's there. And once that house is built, that view will go away from the road. It's a change from what's there now. Obviously, that whole area had been previously open. But it is dark. It blends in with the scenery. It is not visible from 50 feet away. You can take a photograph in certain light and make things look a certain way, but it's also facing a neighbor who is not at all upset about the current conditions. As far as the fence, and then as far as the fence on the other side, and I think I should also state, as far as the 4-foot fence, deer fences, again, as long as they are not visible, are allowed to be up to 8 feet in the front yard. As far as the solid fence along the accessway, I think the board accurately looked at the regulations that show where accessways are in front yard and side yard setbacks. That's the side yard. That is what your staff determined it to be. And as far as the safety issue, I mean, I think that to me is the most important, because no one wants there to be an unsafe circumstance. Even if you're completely allowed to do something, you should never do anything that's going to make things unsafe for anyone. And I appreciate, again, going through the correspondence that the staff went through in making their determinations. They had the fire marshal come out and say, are there any issues with sight lines, with safety? And the fire marshal said there were not. So I think that is, again, it's different. Is it the same view that they had pulling out of their driveway before? No, but it's not an unsafe circumstance. The neighbors on that side have, I think it's between 8 and 9 cars generally in their driveway. And frankly, that is a big part of the reason that fence is solid in that area, is to protect my client's view from the driveway, which is right up against the property line in that area. I think that and I will also say that that solid fence, I know it wasn't brought up by Attorney Lambert, but there was an allegation in his letter that that fence was higher than 6 feet tall, and it's not. Those were all 6 foot, pre-made 6 foot fence panels in that area. If there were any other questions specifically, I'd be happy to answer them, or my client can as well. He's here.
Rich Carity, just with the discussion about the fence being put behind the trees versus, in front of the trees, any comment on that?
No, I mean, again, that fence is fairly near to the property line on that side. Again, if there's a discussion with that property owner and we want to have some more trees put in, that can be a conversation that can be had. But again, that fence will not be visible once that house is built. That is a private property owner's property on that
But
side.
we're looking at it now, not theoretically in the future of what might happen. I mean, I don't know who's going to plant what along what fence at some time in the future.
But I guess perhaps I'm not understanding the question, but the fence blends in with the tree line that's there. And I guess what I'm saying is that there's not an objection from the neighbor on that side to the fence.
It's Jessica Card. My understanding too with the deer fence is that it's aesthetically the same on both sides.
Correct.
So it's not like something where it's the full wood panel where one side is truly more aesthetic than the other. This is the same thing.
Correct, yes,
So
that fence.
by that point, it does actually meet the literal written
The finished
requirement.
side of this fence is on the inside, not the
No,
outside.
they're literally the same thing when it's deer fence.
No,
it's
they're
like
not, because a
essentially
deer,
the
if it
same
was like a
thing.
round pole, it would be, these poles are like a square, and this is
Yeah,
on the
but it's a
inside.
square on all sides.
Correct. The fence is identical from both sides.
You'd have that argument with any fence, you'd have it with a chain link fence, you'd have it with any fence other than a stockade fence, you'd have that same argument.
No, I mean, not necessarily. There's a lot more where it's clearly one side is different from the other, with most of these wood stacked
That's what I'm saying,
ones.
that's the only kind
Yeah,
that
but
would
with a
apply
deer
on.
fence, that's one of the only ones where you're gonna literally have it be aesthetically the same on both sides.
So to the extent you want to apply that argument to the solid wood privacy fence along the access way, the nicer side is facing the access way. To the extent that we're talking about the deer fence is identical, whichever side you're looking at it from. I've seen it from both sides. I can say that with certainty.
Have you looked at this, Jessica?
Yes, I've driven past it.
Yeah, I have to. It's the biggest deer I ever saw driving in.
Are there any other specific questions? that I
Yeah,
can
you know,
answer?
Rich, just to clarify again, so this is the picture I'm looking at, right? So I'd be driving up the road.
Mhm.
So how would another house being built on the lot block this fence?
Well,
Am I
again,
misunderstanding? I'm sorry.
so, there will be another house and landscaping. Right now, it's just an open field. And, if there is, that neighbor has raised no complaints or concerns about the deer fence.
Doesn't have a house like that.
This is Alex Snyder. Did you say it's currently being developed though?
Correct.
When we apply the zoning, it's always helpful if the neighbors have feedback, but that's not like a very substantive factor, like we're looking at like the neighborhood.
And I think that, but I want to be very careful about the statement that you just made. You are not applying the zoning regulations. You're deciding, this is very different from the prior application where you're looking at a variance. You are solely looking at whether or not your staff's decision to issue a zoning permit for the gate was proper.
This is Alex Snyder. What I'd like, read the memo, I understand the point. I'd obviously like to hear from others their interpretation of the Reardon decision and the Greenfield decision.
Sure. Would you like to hear from staff at this time? I believe that there's been conversations with the town attorney as well about this.
I'll defer to the chairman.
If you don't have anything else you want to say now, and again, everyone, we'll have the chance to come up again if they want.
Sure.
We want to make sure everyone
Unless
has
the-
adequate opportunity. So if you have anything else you want to say now, or if you want to wait, it's your decision.
Yeah, only if there are any other specific questions that I can answer at this time. Okay.
All right, do you want us to sit up here or you
I
fine with us here?
prefer, unless you need to,
Okay, no.
it's. We weren't on the screen before or anything, so.
Okay, so we're going to briefly start with the timeline of our actions. This was in the record, so I'm just going to assume that you all had the time to review it, but just to briefly go over what occurred. First and foremost, back in April, the property owner of 78 and 92 Pastures Lane reached out to Stephen, our assistant zoning inspector, where they had an email exchange about the driveway, gate, and deer fence regulations. Time goes on. They submit for a building permit. We receive a complaint from attorney Todd Lampert with concerns about fencing installed on the Pastures Lane property and concerns that it violates the zoning regulations. So later that week, I requested Stephen go investigate the property to understand what fencing was installed and if there is a violation on the property. He goes and does his inspection. He does not find that there are violations on the property, except for concerns that there may need to be mature landscaping installed to screen the deer fence more solidly. We then receive the permit for the driveway
What
gate.
date was that where you thought they might have installed more landscaping?
So June 14 was the complaint. June 17th is when Stephen made his inspection, and then June 26th is when the majority of the landscaping was installed.
And where was that additional landscaping?
So all of the trees.
On the
Yeah,
inside
really,
of the
all
they
of-
were sitting in place, but they weren't planted yet.
So all of the evergreen trees that are around the deer fence were not on the property prior to
That-
mid-June.
So he thought you needed
You want to
he
be,
thought the trees, he thought the front side of the fence. Assuming the front side as in like the road side, not the easement side.
Yeah.
Had to be screened from the road, you're
Yeah,
saying?
that's in the regulations. That needs to be screened from the roads. Yeah.
And what's the distinction of not having to screen it on the side?
That's the side property line.
Yeah, not the front.
That's not the front property line, it's the side property line.
But in the front setback, you're saying that doesn't apply, the same screening rule?
It's only in the front setback that
not the
that's
side.
required.
Doesn't apply to the side, but it applies to the front.
But I'm saying if you had a fence along the front, is my question, maybe I'm not explaining well, but let's say you had a fence along the front of the property here. And it goes like this and up to, part of the way still in the front setback. You're saying the screening only applies to the part along the road, it doesn't apply to the
So-
other part in the front setback?
So we are jumping ahead. I do have a presentation where I am gonna go through every single regulation. So I was just going through the timeline as a courtesy. We can move on to the regulation if that's preferable. I would just prefer to.
So that was
discuss
June
everything.
26th,
Yep, I would-
Yes.
okay.
So the trees get installed. Stephen does not issue the zoning permit for the driveway gate until all the trees are installed. Just as a policy, we do not issue zoning permits if there is an active violation on the property or concern that there's an active violation, just so we have, enforcement authority to incentivize people to comply with the zoning regulations. The zoning permit is issued on July 11th. We continue to receive complaints from the Pastures Lane neighbors with concerns about the fencing. And then I, to try to wrap up the process because there is a clear disagreement, I recommend or I state to the neighbors that, if they find that our permit was issued in error due to violations on the property, that they could submit an appeal. I understand that there is the dispute between Attorney Lampert and Attorney Zavatakis on the merits of the appeal and how it was written. I have spoken to the town attorney about that, and there's, the town attorney did echo that lack of enforcement is not an appealable decision. Appealing a zoning permit is a appealable decision. And, it is up to the zoning board to determine, does having violations on the property, if there are, does that mean that the zoning permit was issued in error? We don't think that it was issued in error. We also don't think that there are violations on the property. I'm happy to talk through our rationale of why we don't think there are.
I think that'd be
Zoning-
helpful, but just back to what you said a minute ago about that email you sent, because that's the one that kind of stood out a little bit when I was reading the cases.
Okay.
Where you said you could appeal it.
That they
because
could-
if you don't think there's a decision, then why would you say they could appeal it?
So I said that they could appeal the issuance of the zoning permit, and so we have a zoning regulation that states that we cannot issue a zoning permit if there's a violation on the property. So that's where we felt that they could then appeal the zoning permit if they felt that there was a zoning violation on the
Okay,
property.
that's helpful.
Yeah.
So even if there was inaction, let's say it was just a case about, there wasn't a zoning permit.
Yeah,
Hypothetical, let's say it was just someone said, I don't like this fence next to me, and it wasn't something requiring a permit, and you just said, well, I'm not enforcing it. Then
That's not
their
an
relief would be to go to the Superior Court
So.
to get mandamus, and that's,
Exactly.
you're in agreement on that.
Yes.
Maybe we hear from the other side, so that seems like a simpler fact pattern. But here, because of the regulation in the town that says you're not gonna issue a zoning permit if there's a violation, and you issue that zoning permit, you're saying that's the part that you said was appealable, well, that you said they could appeal if they wanted.
Yes.
That's helpful, thank you.
Okay, so any questions on the timeline, or I'll go to the interpretation? No?
Wait,
But
one
sorry.
final
Yeah.
question, sorry.
No, you're good.
There was one line on there I see where it must have been your team that requested the darker stain. Can you?
Yes, sure. So, at first, when we were going through this, we felt that it was in compliance, even with the brighter fencing, just because, the wood would fade over time, and that would, make it darker, blend in a little more. And again, the properties are subject to change. And again, since the property right next to them is a vacant lot, and they don't have control over what happens to it, penalizing them for being next to a vacant lot seemed like unnecessary hardship that we would be imposing on them. But, we continued to receive complaints from the neighbors, and, we do respect when we receive complaints. So we, trying to bridge this gap between the neighbors and there clearly being a dispute, we requested that they paint them darker. And then, that would really address the regulation that says that the fence needs to be of, a dark color. So we were trying to just really, bring this to a happy medium, and we're not able to do so. Okay. Any other questions? No.
Are there any questions about the layout of the property or anything on the property itself? Because I could give context to it if there's any confusion. Like what we were talking about before, there's approximately 250 feet of frontage along the lot, which is pretty densely covered in trees. And it's very difficult to see the 8-foot deer fence on the backside of that. Obviously going down the side property line, as we discussed, the trees moved to inside the fence, which is different, as we just spoke about, from it being in the front yard setback. And then, yeah, the fence meets our regulation where it comes to needing to be of a dark appearance.
And is the fence right on the property line?
From what we can tell.
Yeah, which is permitted. So I just wanted to highlight the exact regulation, so it's clear for you all. Attorney Lampert brought up that you can't have an 8-foot fence in the setback. That's incorrect, because the height requirements for fencing, which is outlined in subsection 65C2 of the zoning regulations, does not apply to deer fences whatsoever, based on the notwithstanding language. Second, there are the A, B, and C of the requirements within the regulations for deer fences to be permitted to be up to 8 feet tall. It must be installed in a wooded area. The zoning regulations do not have a definition of a wooded area. We felt that having dense trees as were planted here would constitute a wooded area. So we felt that it met A. And then for B, the deer.
So wooded area just means trees on one side, not both sides.
There is no regulation there's no definition in the regulations. We felt that having dense trees right next to each other, yes, on one side, we felt that
Is a wooded area.
And I mean, it also says and/or shall be screened from the street by landscaping.
But that
There is
second one wouldn't
landscaping.
be applied, so it'd be the highlighted one. Is this in a wooded area, I think? I'm asking the question.
So again, as we interpreted the regulations, we felt that this met the standard of a wooded area. There are dense trees that have been planted. So then second, a deer fence and associated, posts shall be of a dark color or other color. So it's all dark brown or black. And we feel that it blends in relatively well with the with the landscaping. And then finally, the requirement is it is not especially visible at a distance of 50 feet. Especially visible is an incredibly vague term. If the regulations intended for it to not be visible from the street, we feel that it should say that it is not visible, but it has this term especially. That is a very difficult term to interpret. We feel that, if this were a white fence, that would clearly pop out, that would be very visible. Depending on the angle you're standing at, depending on how the light is hitting it, sometimes it is more visible than in other situations. It is visible. It's not especially visible.
Yeah, I mean, you have to read it with all the statutes. I don't think they're saying it has to be invisible. This says especially visible. But say this was a 8-foot high chain link fence. I mean, like, cause a deer fence, I mean, they can be different ways, like the house I mentioned before, going up Weed Street, that had a similar fence. They just had put trees on both sides of it. That was the difference here. And they had those round posts that look kind of like trees. But what is it? Does any fence that's 8-foot high qualify for a deer fence? Because I mean, the deer fence isn't a defined term, so again, it's very subjective. And this board is not reviewing this with like deference to your decision, assuming that it's even something subject to appeal, which is another question, but assuming it's subject to appeal, then we're looking at this, de novo, and we're trying to interpret, I guess, the same words you're trying to interpret. And I don't know how. I don't know what they mean, obviously, between what's a deer fence and what's not, outside of like the because if you put up any 8-foot high fence, it stops a deer.
So, I mean, the regulations, first off, to address your comment about height, clearly an 8-foot deer fence can be subject because the regulations would not state that height and permit it as of right if the regulations did not want to permit up to 8 feet tall deer fences. And, secondly, there is no exact definition for deer fences, but again, it's clear to us. A chain link fence is a very clear type of fencing. If this were a chain link fence, we would say that's a chain link fence, not a deer fence. You cannot have an 8-foot fence. Same with a stockade fence. Same with, a picket fence. Typically, a deer fence has this, wire meshy type material, which it has. There really is only one type of material that is a deer fence that we see in New Canaan. Are the posts typically metal and not wood? Yes, but the main parts of this fence, these are the deer fences we see all
But
throughout New
usually the
Canaan.
fence is plastic, like black plastics. You don't really see it. I mean, you can have some.
Chicken wire too.
I mean, but I'm saying usually it's a black fence, not a metal fence. This is like a metal fence, like what you have it's very similar, like where I grew up when you had cows. You'd have the same fence as this, except only be 4 feet high for cattle.
So again, I'm saying that the material is very standard for what we see across New Canaan for deer fences.
So you see a lot of these like metal fences.
Correct. There's one, I drive past it every day. It's the last one on 123. Before you get into Vista, it's 8 feet right in the front yard. There happen to be, tall trees like this, right, actually behind the fence. Same thing, this happens elsewhere in New Canaan.
Just last week, one went up on Echo Hill, which is a private road, same exact type. And
The steel fence
yep,
with the wooden posts.
yeah, they did bark on wooden posts, but
So I can move on to the stockade fence, unless there are any other questions on the deer fence.
And all I would say is, to me, at least with that picture, is there, it roughly seems to represent the view for the 50 feet, but I would say that the black stain seems to make a difference, whereas before I would have said maybe it is especially visible. This does blend in a little bit more and does meet the requirement that it be of a darker color.
Well, the post, but the fence is still a metal fence. It's not like the black deer fence, you would say.
It is black.
The
I think
metal
it's
is
just the
black?
way the
Yeah.
light's hitting
I thought the
it.
post they stained, but I thought the fence
The
was like a
metal
metal
no, the metal's,
fence.
here's a close up from the
Yeah.
other side.
It's black.
So the metal is black. So I thought the metal was metal.
No, it's black. I think you could see it better in Attorney Lampert's, but I think you have one in the.
Yeah.
This one makes it a little easier to see what's between the posts.
Yep.
Which one?
What's this? What do you have?
No, I can see the post. I was talking about the fence in between them.
Can you zoom on that picture?
Yeah, I thought the fencing was metal, but maybe I was wrong when I looked at it.
Okay, thank you.
I mean, it had a black wire along the top, but I thought like the,
Can you see it better now?
no, I can't see that.
Well, that's good.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard in a photograph.
Okay, so do you want me to go on to the
Yeah.
stockade fence now? Okay. So similarly, do you all have any questions about where the fence concerns in question are on the property? Because Stephen can kind of describe that further.
It'd be helpful for me if you could walk it through.
Okay, so basically the deer fence continues around the front of the property, rounding both driveways and then coming down this access way.
So kind of where it says 56.7.
Yeah, and then further down towards about where it bends is where the fence you can see here starts. And it continues all the way up to the circled portion, which is in question for safety reasons.
Okay.
And then
And
this-
this going back, so the deer fencing trace backwards goes, so that's going forward
It's
now.
roughly there, yeah.
And just to go back the other way so I can see the deer fencing, just,
The photo of the deer fence?
no, just
Or-
continue,
sorry.
continue on the map with
Yeah.
your cursor.
So deer fence ends about here.
But
And
now I
now
want you to go the other direction.
stockade.
Once you
And-
go the other direction, how far back does the deer fencing?
The entire 78 property.
All the way back to that tree line? Past the house, back to the tree line?
I can't visibly see back there because it's private property,
Okay.
so I did not go on to anything other than the access way to see
But in this,
how it continues.
regardless of the interpretation of the front yard, and as, regardless of that, this is a side property line where it says 168 back here, once you're bordering private property, so 6-foot tall stockade fence is permitted as of right, 8-foot deer fence is permitted as of right. The landscaping requirements do go away because there is no front yard. At that
I
point.
don't know if I'm looking at this wrong, but is that, the red is the deer fence you're saying?
No, so
No.
this is an outline of 92 Pastures
So this
Lane, which
is-
is
yep.
the neighboring property
This
that
is
the
the-
stockade fence is on. As you can see, 78 is above, which is where we just showed you the deer fence issue. Both of these properties are owned by the same LLC.
Oh, okay, that was my confusion.
Okay.
Is the
So,
stockade fence new?
yes.
Yes,
Okay, so they bought the two properties and one has the deer fence and one has the stockade fence.
Yes.
And can you go back to that picture again? In the driveway that creates a question in front of the front yard that they raised is not the one on the bottom, but the one on the top? This one, that's the one.
that's the existing driveway for the
Yes, and
property.
if you,
It serves both,
I will,
both houses.
I will get to that in a moment.
Okay.
Okay, so first and foremost, we're gonna start with before we get into the front yard, debate, we're gonna just briefly discuss this blocking of visibility and concerns for an obstruction. So as Attorney Lampert had mentioned, the fencing requirements say that you cannot have any obstructions, and it specifically says as required by section 6.9A. So you then go to section 6.9A, and what it states is anything abutting an access way at its intersection with a street can't have a fence wall or obstruction of vision more than 3 feet in height. This is not an intersection with an access way and a street.
Can you
If-
show on the cursor again, which of those roads?
This is the
you're
blue
talking about?
circle. That is where the visibility complaint and concern is coming
Okay.
from the neighbors. And again, section 6.9A is protecting access ways and driveways abutting an intersection with a street. And that's where the 3-foot height requirement comes in.
That's 6.9A you said?
Yes.
Yes, 6.9.
So that is why we felt that that was not in violation. And then further, there's also driveway obstruction to ensure that fire access is not impeded by obstructions. And we had the fire marshal and the fire chief review it, and they felt comfortable that a fire truck could still access any of these 3 homes. So there was no concern of that violation.
So
as
you're
well.
saying 6.9.B would apply, but it doesn't, it's not violated.
6 point,
Driveway obstructions?
yes, with the fire access and whatnot.
But it's not filed.
It was not violated. We had the fire chief.
So it's at least 4, it's not restricting it to less than 14 feet
Correct.
wide.
And
it's,
we went an extra step and made sure the fire marshal and fire chief were comfortable. Okay,
and 6.9.6.9B.2 is again referencing the travel portion of a road, not an access way. So both 6.9A and the 6.9B.2 deal with the access way to a road.
correct. Okay, so moving on to the front yard question. So as, again, Attorney Lampert had mentioned, there was a 1997 subdivision where basically 78 Pastures Lane was the original house, and these 8 or 9 lots were created. Part of the approval was that when 92 severed from title from 78, the driveway that is servicing both parcels would have to be relocated to this access way. 92 and 78 were sold by the original owner to the LLC that Mr. Badon now owns. So they still have not severed in title. So the driveway still has not been relocated. And therefore, when you go to the definition of front yard and access way, the front yard is this line circled in blue. So just to briefly get into that, the definition of a front yard in the case of a rear lot is the lot line between the principal building and the location of the access way serving that lot. And the term "that" is important and was integral in our interpretation of the regulations. So now if you go to what is the definition of an access way, it is land containing a driveway. Okay, so if you reread the front yard definition again, the lot line between the principal building and the location of the land containing a driveway serving that lot. The driveway serving that lot abuts this line in blue, not this line here. So therefore, this is not the front property line. If it were the front property line, you could only have a 4-foot tall.
So
fence.
that bottom driveway serves the house only in back there.
Correct. And there's a requirement subdivision that the lot, when it severs in title, relocate its driveway to serve on that access way, and then that would change where the front yard is, but that has not happened. We don't know when that's going to happen. We cannot require the zoning regulations to be enforced for a condition that does not exist today. We can't proactively enforce the zoning regulations.
Because the lot might never separate.
It may not. And when it does, we will enforce that regulation, but that would be like saying, okay, this person, may want to build a sport court in this location, so therefore you can't, put like a retaining wall, it's just in general,
You
we
can't talk
can't assume that there's going
Yeah.
to be a future condition.
Yeah. But if that lot this fence isn't on the lot being severed or the original lot? Well, I guess it's the same owner or both that create a violation if they severed, you're saying.
Yes, but so again, they would be violating the subdivision regulation if they sold without relocating the driveway. And then also you would then in theory now be violating the zoning regulations. And I mean,
If they relocated the driveway, how would it violate the zoning regulation?
it would violate the subdivision approval, not the zoning regulation.
Okay. And can you repeat like that subdivision approval requirement?
is that when the lots sever in title from one another, the driveway must be relocated to that shared access way that currently serves the other lots.
In which, can you show on the map where that shared access way is?
It is this,
Essentially, they wouldn't want you to use whatever the existing driveway is as an extension of the access way.
correct?
But how would that violate it when they remove it? Because that, if they move
that
it, then
would-
isn't the front yard then the side to the south? That's not the front yard anymore.
Yeah, then it makes the front yard where that 6-foot fence is now.
Yes,
Which is a violation.
which
Okay.
would be a violation.
Yeah, I understand that. Okay.
Which again, when that happens, we're going to have to be involved anyway to ensure the driveway gets relocated because we have to enforce the subdivision conditions. And then therefore we know, okay, the driveway is being relocated, this fence now also has to be removed. So it's not like we won't be involved and be aware if that ever happens.
A process for that lot separation where it has to come before the town in some manner.
So, I mean, not before a board or anything like that, but when the home sales, title will have to be pulled, deeds will have to be researched, this
A new
subdivision
driveway permit
approval,
will have to be pulled.
this, subdivision approval will come up on the land records and it will be clear, like when this home was for sale a year or two ago, we were aware and we were involved, and that's when we learned about the subdivision approval, so this isn't going to slip under the radar.
There's a mechanism where it could become right in the future.
Yeah,
Even if they didn't build something new.
correct. When this home was on the market, we were contacted by real estate agents and potential buyers with questions about the subdivision approval.
But did they have to come back for a zoning permit for anything to sell it?
No.
So it's just if someone reaches out, there's not like an affirmative duty for them.
So
to
I
come
mean,
back.
typically what would happen then is, a Mylar has, or, so again, I forgot about this. A Mylar would likely have to be filed on the land records to then confirm the relocation of the driveway.
And are you notified of
Yes,
that?
I have to sign Mylars for them to be filed on the land records.
So you need to report a Mylar to move your driveway.
In this case, probably because of the subdivision, yes, but not all the time. But also, as Stephen was saying, relocating a driveway would require a driveway permit.
And a driveway permit's in the town,
Yes,
Yeah, it's with Public Works, but we're notified.
unless it's a state road, right?
this is not a state
No, I'm
road.
just asking the question.
Public Works is typically still involved.
Because of the change in impervious as well in the drainage policy.
Okay. And why is a building permit required for the gate?
Electrical probably,
Okay.
The fire marshal needs to be involved as well because he needs the code to get in.
Because it's an
there's a-
electrical gate.
if there's a
Because
fire.
normally you wouldn't, I didn't think normally
I mean, if they're
they'd go for
footing,
a gate for a permit.
Yeah, no,
mean-
because it needs electrical
It needs
inspection.
electrical.
And then the fire marshal's also involved because he needs a key to get in.
Okay.
but also typically these gates, have large pillars, they have footings, then you may need a footing inspection from the building department. Okay, so that is all we have. I do have additional photos that Stephen took after the posts were painted, just for reference. This is the fence from another angle. This is the area of the driveway where the neighbors have concern about the visibility obstruction. This is just another view of when, the deer fence ends and when it becomes the stockade fence. This is, another photo of this is the deer fence along 92 Pastures Lane, before the stockade fence starts, and, we would also consider this a wooded area. Although I don't believe,
It's not in the front yard.
yeah, so it doesn't apply. And those are all the photos we took.
And if the deer fence but not through a wooded area, what's the height requirement
So
in
the,
a front yard?
in a front yard, Sorry, let me pull up the regulation again.
I don't believe it gives a break on height, but you're allowed to have a 4-foot fence in the front yard without it being in a wooded area. Deer fence or not.
Okay.
So it doesn't necessarily
Yeah.
express it, but
So I don't think the height, yeah, is a factor in this, but in theory, 4 feet and below is permitted.
In the side yard, does it have the wooded area requirement, or that's just the front
No,
yard?
just-
It's just the front yard.
Okay. Because normally when we talk about the front yard, we talk about the front yard setback. So let's say the front yard setback's 25 feet. My
40,
understanding would be
45.
like, let's say it's a stockade fence. Let's take the deer fence out of the thing, because it seems to get more complicated here, because there's a lot of ambiguity here, which is
But
unfortunate.
it is important to note that specifically the zoning regulations state that deer fences are not subject to the other setback and height requirements of other fences like stockade fences.
No,
So
but
I just want to be clear
I
about
understand that, but let's say it's a regular fence. Normally, when we say the front yard, we're talking about like the whole front yard setback area, not just like the straight line along the road. I mean, I don't remember us ever adopting that. We've had,
Yeah,
we've
you're
told people with
correct.
other fences,
So-
they have to lower it in the first 25 feet.
That is
or
correct.
50 feet.
So if you have a picket fence in your front yard and you're in the 2-acre zone, for the first 35 feet of your property in the front, it can only be 4 feet tall. But again, this is a deer fence and the regulation says notwithstanding the requirements of this subsection. So to us, that means that that setback requirement also does not apply because it's notwithstanding the whole subsection.
But why does any of it apply then for the front yard? Like, I'm having trouble defining like, what's the front yard then? If you're not looking at like the front yard setback. Like, because before you said it had to be screened along the road, but how is just along the road the front yard? And not the 25 feet or whatever when you take the corner?
So I think there's a little miscommunication. We are saying it is screened as it meets what is required of the zoning regulations in this. The fence being on the outside part of that side area does not change its ability to meet the requirement because it's still not especially visible. It's in a wooded area, which is the requirement.
So
We're saying it's in a wooded area and that it meets the requirement. It's also not especially visible.
So in the front yard one wasn't in a wooded area, you're saying? I'm just trying to distinguish why they were required to plant bushes on the front and not the
We did
corner.
not require, we did not tell them where to plant the trees. They planted them. This is what happened.
Okay,
We find that it's
I told them
acceptable.
what the regulations were and this is
What
what
they
they
did.
did.
We
Okay.
did not tell them to put the trees where they put them.
so you're gonna say you have to put trees in front of it?
No,
That
we
was their
just,
decision, okay.
Yeah.
I thought before you
no,
were saying
we
you
did
had to.
not, we did not require or
Okay.
dictate the location.
Was that more to actually present that it was wooden and in a wooden area and or screened?
Yes,
But if it's screened, it doesn't have to be in a wooded area.
it
right?
says and or, which I
Yeah,
find
and
to
or,
be.
either one, it has to be screened or wooden area, yeah.
Yeah, so
So it's not screened on the side, so the question is it in a wooded area?
we felt that it meets the standard for a wooded area.
It doesn't need to be on the side, in the side setback, side yard setback, it does not need to be in a wooded area or screen,
What about
only
in
in the front.
But what about the
So-
front yard setback, not along the road? But
So
you're
again,
saying
it-
that section, like I'm talking like the,
Yeah, so we're
what's the
talking
setback
about,
here, 50 feet or
it's
35?
35, it's
Yeah.
45. So
45.
again, yes, so for that first 45 feet, we feel that that could be considered a wooded area.
Okay, that's my question. So
Yes.
that 45
Yeah.
feet, it still has to be the screened or wooded area?
Yep.
Yes.
And
because
your
it says front yard.
position is,
Is that
it's
a
wooded
area.
because it's wooded area. It's got
Yeah.
bushes on one side, they help make it not as obvious, even if they're not on both sides, so it's a wooded area.
That's correct.
So, and this assumes, it's a decision to appeal.
Yes.
In the decision that the question on regarding whether or not there's a decision to appeal was the email you sent on, let me look at your timeline again, on
July 18th.
July 18th. And then,
So I mean, I can, if it's helpful, my email states that Sorry, I thought I would find it faster than I did. Never mind, if you had something you were trying to say.
You said it's 45-foot setback there?
For the front
For
yard,
the front
yes.
yard.
Sorry, I have a lot of questions, but it's helpful for me to understand this because it's a little unusual, especially the ambiguity in the statute here, which is really in some ways unfortunate. Putting a burden on the two of you to interpret what exceptional means in this and that, but I think by any stretch of the imagination, you can't read exceptional out. So,
Especially.
yeah, especially.
Especially. Yeah.
Does anyone else on the board have questions? I mean, I've done a lot of talking here. And this is, at least the new members of the board, this is we have very few appeals of zoning inspection decisions, which may be good, but, so it's unusual procedurally, it's unusual in subjectivity. Most of what we do is variances, but if anyone has questions, they really should ask them because we all try to work together as a team.
No, so I mean, I think one is, I'm thinking carefully about the question of fact of, is that a wooded area? And was that decision that it's a wooded area correct? In terms of interpretation of what a wooded area is.
That's the question I'm kind of struggling with.
Yep.
But the wooded area would only apply to the first 45 feet.
Correct.
It's not this, because really, you look at it, and this isn't what we're gonna judge our decision on, because we judge it based on the regulation. But that's only a short distance in front. I mean, the fence must be 100 feet long plus on that stretch there before it takes the 90 to the side.
And just another thing, we don't necessarily know where that front property line falls. So those trees could start 5 feet back from the property line, they could start on the property line.
I recall
We
it
don't
was
have it
surveyor
up to
stakes
date.
there.
Okay,
Yeah, so there's.
We went there.
it's not something I took note of.
Yeah.
I'll
I
share my
recall seeing
screen,
surveying
so,
stakes.
or no, I didn't share my screen.
Only the portion that's in the front yard.
Only the first 45
40,
feet, that's what I was asking
45
for.
feet.
Only the
Yep.
first 45 feet does that question apply
So again,
to.
you can see,
That's the front
that's
definition of
probably
front
the
yard
front
setback.
that's the front property line there, so it's in front of this
45 feet
tree,
back from
so
there.
it's
Yeah.
Yeah,
45
so 45 feet
from
from that
stake.
line is 45 feet from that line
Would-
in a wooded area is a question that I'm,
From
I'm
that,
kinda struggling
from
with.
that picture, it looks more wooded, obviously, than this picture.
yeah. I mean, but
Artistic
I
license.
guess the
It's all
definition of
sub-
what's wooded is subjective, but I don't know if
Yeah.
having bushes on one side of something makes something wooded or not. Again, this is a
So
subjective question.
the other, thing to keep in mind is that deer fence, and again, we didn't tell them where to plant the trees or where to put the deer fence, but that is on the side property line, so they don't have control over what happens, again, to that vacant lot. So and again, I don't want to speculate, so, never mind. I'm not going to speculate.
I think
but
the
never-
question would be is if it's a wooded area, is there required to be something on their property on the first 45 feet? Not what the neighbor does, because they can't control what the
Right.
neighbor does.
And it doesn't provide that level of guidance in the statute, so.
It's gonna be just the first, usually a deer fence, they're 15 or 20 feet apart, the posts, they're not 8 feet like a normal fence. or
And
10
again,
feet
I-
like a chain link, so it's only like the first two sections there.
I would just
Maybe.
argue that wooded area, it doesn't specify that it has to be on their property. And I mean, you think about, many areas of New Canaan, like the 4-acre zone, when you get really far up north in town, and these lots are huge, there are trees on both sides. Most cases you are putting your fence on your property line. So odds are if it's meeting this 2-side test that you all are toying with, it's probably not trees on their property on that other side. It's probably the other property's trees. So just, food for thought if you're, because
I don't know if that's kind of like a subjective thing with
So,
nothing to
again,
back it up. I mean, I have a deer fence in my house and I didn't put it right on the line. A lot of people don't put it exactly on the line.
So again,
I mean, some people
we're-
might too, and I'm saying we don't have information to reach a conclusion.
So I mean,
of
we do
probability.
have, again, I don't have numbers. I could have provided numbers, I suppose, but we do this every day. We advise New Canaan property owners on where to put their fence, and the majority of fences that we see day to day are being placed on property lines. In most cases, maybe a foot off, just so they don't accidentally put it on their neighbor's property line, but many of them are going on the property line.
I'm sure it's partly a concern of eminent domain and just whether or not there
Correct.
could be some use, yeah.
Or just to max out the use of their.
Yeah.
property.
Yeah, I think it's some actual.
The enjoyment.
As well as notify people, hey,
Yeah.
And just to clarify, it is that it's installed in a wooded area and or shall be screened. So if we can't determine if we feel that's sufficiently a wooded area or defining a wooded area, then you would have the option of saying, is it effectively screened by
Correct.
landscape?
Correct.
and thinking of it as a front yard.
Yeah, the difficulty being with it right on the line.
And
how would you
note
screen the
that
landscaping?
All of them, A, B, and C, have to be met in totality.
Right.
Which means it doesn't necessarily mean that each one, you could give them equal weight, or you might be able to say that if two of the factors are more sufficiently important, there's not a lot of guidance.
I mean, it's
So-
kind of strange in that it seems like there's a lot of like attorney's fees being spent here. And if there was an easement, or even if the neighbor just planted stuff on both sides for the first 45 feet, it seems like a big part of the argument will almost be like eviscerated. Like, I don't know if they own all three of these lots, but it's like,
Okay, so the
I've seen
vacant
fences
lot is
before where the
owned
neighbor
by
gives an
someone
easement
else.
to maintain.
Yeah, the vacant lot is owned by a
Who?
different LLC.
Yeah, a different entity.
Cause I mean, I've seen cases though where someone gets an easement from the neighbor to maintain a fence, cause they put it right on the line, so they'll get an easement so they can, I've been involved in
But
those before.
Again,
That wouldn't
you
be
are
our
trying to
decision to make.
determine.
No, I'm saying
Yeah.
if they
And
had
that's
something
what-
out of planting, it would like to be no issue.
And
We're
then
looking
that's
at
where you
45
just
feet
said
here.
too about your neighbor's wooded area being responsible for the deer fence.
But again, we're not here to come up with a solution. There is clearly a dispute between all of these neighbors. So I mean, this is just, we issued this permit. This was our thought process. You need to either uphold our decision or
So-
overturn it.
With the timing of when you approved the permit for the gate, it was after you were able to go, because in your email chain, you said you were looking at the screening or the plantings. And so you looked at this section and you said, there's no longer a violation. And that's what, from your perspective, allowed you to go ahead and approve the permit.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you're all sitting there on the board, doesn't any questions, maybe we see if anyone other than the petitioner wants to say anything in the audience, and then maybe we go back in the same order in case someone has a rebuttal, something else they want to add, because I want to make sure everything's in the record. We also, Sarah, how long do we have to render a decision after tonight?
I will double check for you.
Yeah, I'd like
and
to know
get
the
you an
dates.
answer.
We have, oftentimes we vote at the night, but there's like a lot of
Yep.
data being presented tonight. And there's an unusual amount of stuff that's on the website uploaded, including your whole record, which is appreciated, so it might be helpful. For us to potentially, if the timing allows it, to maybe close the meeting tonight if everyone's comfortable and vote at the next meeting. Or I get,
So you all will have to decide because we did get 2 additional applications, so there are already going to be, and you continued last month, so just, you'll have to determine how you want to manage the.
well, I'm not gonna deprive us of the ability for everyone to be comfortable with that, enough time to review everything,
Yeah,
review the laws
I'm just
also.
making you aware.
Legal briefs here, there's questions of law, questions of subjectivity. So it'd be nice to know like when a decision is due by, so that if we can vote next month, that's something we should, potentially consider.
We can't be.
No, but maybe we would close it tonight though, potentially, and then vote next month.
Okay. No, that's.
After the hearing, next year.
That's what I'm saying. After everyone's done tonight, assuming we decide to close it, we'd move into business session and vote at the next meeting if that allows it. Okay.
Mr. Chair, if I may recommend, I think it'd be best, and it's up to you, of course, if I could do a quick rebuttal, and I think attorneys have to talk, and let the people speak that may have to speak, but it's up to you on whether we go.
I'd like to let everyone at least talk once.
Yep.
And then everyone will get, if we have to stay here as late as we have to stay, we stay here. There's lawyers on this board, but no one's billing by the 0.6 right now, over the 6 minutes. So we'll stay as long as it takes. I think I'd like to proceed with everyone getting an opportunity and everyone having a second opportunity if they want it, just so everyone's on the same footing, unless anyone else on the board has a view of that. No. Okay. So is anyone here for or against this application? Why don't we go with anyone here for anyone who supports the appeal? So. Okay, so this is, as we said at the beginning of the meeting, this is being recorded, and some people may be on Zoom. So when you speak, if you could come up to the table and announce who you are, and then talk, there's a button on the microphone here to make it green. And then it'll put you onto the recording. So whichever of the four of you wants to go for it first. If you want to come up and.
If you wish to provide.
If you wish to provide it, you don't have to come up, but I want to make sure everyone has an opportunity to speak.
Please just turn the mic on.
Sure.
Hello, I'm Keith Reed from 89 Pasture Lane. I'm just a New Canaan homeowner for the last 25 years, taxpayer here. This is the first hearing I've been to, hopefully the last. Incredibly confusing. And, everyone talks about speculation, everyone's just used speculation here. We're going to do this, we're going to do that. There's a vacant lot, that vacant lot's been there. I've been there for 25 years and it's been vacant. And so there's always been a driveway on the access road for the guest house that's there. And if this were being built next to your house, I think you would apply the common man's philosophy that a duck is a duck. If it quacks like a duck, it walks like a duck, it swims like a duck, it's a duck. And you could go around all of these policies and call any fence in this entire town a deer fence and put it right next to the road. Would you like to go down South Avenue with everyone at an 8-foot fence right next to their property line and just drive down a tunnel? We could put a fence right out here on Town Hall, 8 foot high, and we could plant some pine trees right behind it and say, this is a wooded area. And we could put it right here based on their definition. It just makes no sense. And you can read any of these regulations and back any position that you want. It's just, I've lived there. I have people who drive by, people that come to my house and they say, wow, that's incredible that they let them build a fence like that right here. You don't have to look and say, can you see it for 50 feet? You can see it for 200 feet. Just walk down there. I can pick 10 guys off the street, walk them down there and say, can you see that fence? I mean, it's obvious if anyone has been down there to take a look at it. It just, it makes no sense. And you can say the front violation, I could call any fence. I could put a fence up on my property and say, hey, this is a deer fence, and put it right on the front of my house. No one on that property has done that. And I thought there were some actual covenants when the subdivision, when Pasture Lane was put into effect, that people, if you put up a fence, it was going to be approved by all the neighbors in the neighborhood. And no one's ever said anything about that. It just, and basically the other attorney gets up here and says, we're only deciding about a gate. Well, then why are you even talking about a gate? Why are you even talking about a fence? Why, it makes no sense. The gate was just put up maybe a couple weeks ago. Okay. The fence has been there for a long time. And I think, that's really what I think the neighbors are disagreeing with. And, that's what I disagree with. So, I want to go absolutely on record by saying, a duck is a duck, a fence is a fence. Okay, it's too close to the road. You can just go there and walk and see. I wouldn't put it on my property like that. I wouldn't do it with that. I would go talk to a neighbor before and say, you know what, this is what I'm thinking of doing or that. I just wouldn't move into a place you have all 5 homes on that street just saying, this is crazy. And, I think somebody needs to go and sit down and reevaluate whoever made that decision. Because based on what I've seen today, is in clear violation of a lot of different points. And you can go through and say something subjective. Is it visible or not visible? Is it wooded or not wooded? Just walk up there and look at it. It's not a wooded area. It was a plain open pasture the whole time. And they basically put up a big wooded fence and basically just lined it with trees. And I wouldn't call that, a wooded area. It's not landscaped. If you can see it from over a couple 100 feet, it's not, that fence isn't landscaped. And, when you talk about the lane going down to Dawn's house and to Schwartz's house, there was always a driveway coming from that guest house that was hooked up in that lower road, what they access the main road from. So, I disagree with the findings, if you or whoever else did it. And I would say, go back and take another look and see if that's something that's there. And I would like you to say, if that was done on the property right next to yours, you may have a very different opinion of what a deer fence is, and it's talking about a gate. No one's sitting here at a gate. They have 2 stone pillars and they put a wood gate there. The whole conversation's been about the fence. Okay. And, so anyway, that's my comments. I don't know if anyone has any questions of me. Happy to answer them.
We appreciate neighbors coming.
Yeah.
We generally don't have neighbors come, so it's really helpful when they do come.
Yeah. No, I came home from work early and I've been here for 2.5 hours. Okay, so.
And Sarah and Steven, they do their job. I haven't seen us before of a definition of what's a deer fence or not. Maybe that's something P and Z has to take up and define. I don't know. But you raise, I think, points that everyone on the board understands or at least is listening to. And the relationship to the gate is, as a Board of Appeals, we have limited jurisdiction. Most of what we do is we grant variances. So if someone has a lot and it's undersized and they can't build a house, we'd say, okay, it's a 25-foot setback. We'll let you do it 23 feet because otherwise, you can't build a house, things like that. Sometimes we'll have an appeal of the zoning enforcement officer's decision, and the question relative to the gate relates to the question of whether or not there's been a decision by the zoning enforcement officer in the first place. Because if there's been no decision, then we don't have something to review. And then the question becomes, if there's no decision, then instead is the proper venue for the people who believe they're aggrieved, instead of coming to us to go to Superior Court, because we can't review something if there's not a decision. So the gate just happens is the decision, as I believe Sarah noted before. I thought she explained it very well, that her email, and the question was just, and I'm going to paraphrase it, but essentially under the regulations in New Canaan, they can't issue a zoning permit if there's another violation.
Oh, yeah, no, I heard that, but I would like you to look at this property and look at that fence in the context of that being on every property going down South Avenue, and think that, have you done your job? If that fence were on every one of those properties.
I think that's
because that could happen.
I think that's a valid concern.
Every property owner in.
Yeah, if they did that all down South Avenue, what would you hear?
Unfortunately, that's something we can't, that's for.
No, but
that's what you're permitting.
But it goes, we're granting a variance. We're not saying you can or can't do something, but I think that question you raise relates to whether or not it's in a wooded area, which is the question we've raised.
Right.
Us, this definition of what's.
It wasn't a wooded area for 25 years. It was a clear, open pasture. They put a fence there and then they put some trees behind it.
But
I wouldn't call that a wooded area.
If we find, or if the town personnel found that it was adequately screened, it was an and/or condition. So I just want to keep, it doesn't necessarily have to be wooded. It could be effectively screened.
It has to be screened over.
So The other point being is we have to look at this
But you
parcel
can see it from
based
over
on-
200 feet or over 50 feet based on your definition, then it's not screened. And
has
anyone
to-
could see it from there.
Again, we have to look at the wording. It has to be especially not visible. So we're trying to parse through the
I know,
same
but
challenges
especially
you're
not visible, okay,
experiencing.
but you're talking form over substance, okay? Take 10 people down there, go 51 feet down and ask them, can you visibly see that fence? I'm happy to be there with you. Pick your 10 people. It's just, it's so obvious. It's like, you can see it. Just go drive there. I do it every day. I mean, it's obvious that that's the case. I would like someone to sit here and argue with me, take out a tape, come with me and just measure it.
Well, that's,
That's,
I think we all, I think everyone agrees it's visible at 50 feet, but the question is what does especially visible mean? Because any fence could be visible at 50 feet. And that's again, like, this is the only regulation I know that has that subjective inquiry there, you know, and I think people hear your concern.
well, I could tell you
Appreciated that you
that
bring it to the board.
and my wife think it's especially visible, okay? And every other home on Pastures Lane would say the same thing. And I'm happy to bring any neighbors or other people and you can hear their opinions.
And I think that's a good point. If everyone in the neighborhood thinks it's especially visible, maybe
It's especially.
maybe it's especially visible.
I mean, so anyway, I'll leave it with that, leave others out.
Thank you very
Thank
much.
you. And again, we appreciate, you know, neighbors coming because
No, I appreciate what you guys are doing.
So, David Schwartz, 115 Pastures Lane. Known Keith for 25 years, lived at 115 Pastures Lane since 2000. Don Sheldon, my next door neighbor, known him for 20 years. Michael Chen, my other neighbor, known him for 20 years. Pastures Lane is a very special place and we're, you know, been a very tight knit group over the years. This is the last place we'd ever thought we'd be today, sitting in front of you guys talking about fences. It's kind of crazy, but we're at a loss, you know, it's kind of, basically, we're kind of stuck and we're trying to figure out what to do. And we're looking for your help. And if you guys could apply common sense, as Keith was saying, as he was getting frustrated thinking about it, if you just go take a look at the fences, you'll understand where we're coming from. We're busy guys, but we're here tonight to try to find a solution to this, okay? And Keith spoke a lot about the deer fencing around the vacant lot, which has been vacant for 25 years and it's been for sale for 25 years, by the way. And we don't know when, how, if it'll ever be, who knows, right? I mean, if you look at the lot, good luck to whoever buys it. Doesn't look so great. Secondly, so I'm going to kind of focus on the stockade fence that goes to my driveway, okay? So going past the mailboxes, driving down the approaching road, and to my left will be Don, and I'm straight ahead, 115. And there is a deadly blind spot right at that intersection between those two driveways, which I think is an incredibly bad hazard, okay? I literally have to slow down to a stop and do the peak because I cannot see. And if you guys would do me the favor and take that 106 detour around and go see Pastures Lane, this before you make your decision, drive down my driveway and you'll see what I'm saying. There's a moment in time where you cannot see one thing. And
If you look at this map, which one is yours?
I'm to the right. 115 is to the right. Don is to the
I walked up
left.
your driveway, I didn't drive.
But if you understand what I'm saying, it is a dead spot. You cannot see coming into my driveway. Don is to my left, Don Sheldon.
Yep.
I'm to the right. And there is a spot, I swear to God, for like 10 feet. You can't see.
Could you point
Yeah,
this
I'm
out on the
sorry.
plan? I think it would just be helpful.
There's no numbers visible on that.
Sorry. Yeah,
No. I don't know that you prepared the copy.
I certainly did. Let's see. Let me see where's the mailbox? All right, sorry. Okay, there's the mailbox. Sorry, I can't read this. It's this bend and it's the bend. See the bend in the
Your house
fence?
is back here.
Yes, I'm straight here. Let's, yeah, yeah, see the bend in the fence here? So this is Don here. Okay, so let's see. So
I pulled it up on
see,
the.
Yeah, if you have it on the screen, it'd be easy.
115 is here and then,
And the numbers are on the screen.
Yeah.
So 115 is
Okay,
here.
okay.
so it's the bend, it's the
Okay.
bend, it's the bend in the fence. So you get to this bend in the fence and for about, there's a moment where you cannot see it. And when you get past that moment and it could be just a T-bone situation right there. I mean, and it is a blind spot of all blind spots. And I have kids that drive and I have, the Amazon guy coming at me. I got the, who knows who's coming out of the Sheldon's driveway. So I'm just telling you, it's a danger. And I'm putting my neighbor on notice and everybody else. If and when something happens, it's a problem. And and we're making it very clear that it's a problem. And I don't know what else to do about it. I mean, I can't go do anything about it personally, so I'm trying to do the right thing and bring it to your attention. This fence should not be there. It's a hazard and it kind of freaks me out every time I drive down there. And I just need you guys to actually take a look. I'm sorry, Richard, if you went down there, you'll understand what I'm saying. It's a moment when you're driving down there and you see my 115 sign, you look and you literally have to stop because you can't see it. And something has to be done.
So that fence is blocking the view from 118?
I can't see Don, yeah, I can't see. If I'm going into my driveway and Don is to my left, right, the Sheldon's 118, there's a moment where I can't see anything. I mean, you can't see it and you're on it. It's right at that moment. So if you just drive down there, you'll understand what I'm saying. I just want you guys to know that sure, a fire truck can fit down there, but that's not relevant to the true safety of that particular spot. And I just need you guys to be aware. And I want it on the record that it is a hazard and something really bad could happen. And I'm just putting it on the record tonight. And that's why I came here.
I think
Okay.
we understand your concern.
Thank you.
And we're looking at, and I believe everyone here has been there. We really make an effort to go to the site, but,
It's on record.
6.9 is we can't subjectively make regulations. We're reading 6.9 here on these corners, on these definitions of corners here in sight lines. While you're up here, do you want to comment on the visibility of this? Not the fence you're concerned with, but are you familiar with the
What was
other
the
fence?
terminology on that fence? It's especially visible? It's especially visible. It's really, really visible. I'd say it's very especially visible. I don't know if that's in there either. So I'd say on the deer fence, it's especially visible. It's not in a wooded area. And maybe there was a mistake made in the judgment of, determining that. I know the definitions are vague and are subject to interpretation. My interpretation is clear that it is especially visible and not appropriate for that site. The site is, as Keith said, been for sale for 25 years. So we don't know when, if ever it will be developed. And, that's all I know. I know what I see today.
Is one of your neighbors here the owner of that site?
No, it's a builder. I don't know who it is. It's an LLC builder that bought it from the Mounts. So the Mounts sold the two.
We'd love him to mow it.
Yeah, it'd be nice. Can we if somebody get his number, we'll tell him to mow it.
Yeah, I saw the biggest deer in my life.
Yeah, there's some big
On
ones in
that
there.
property
Right.
as I
It
drove
sits
in.
there.
I mean, I literally have pictures of it on my phone.
Yep. So anyway, so that's been, the Mount sold that to a builder. That's all I know, the former owners. So those are I just wanted everyone to be aware of on the stockade fence issue for me, okay? Thank you.
Again, we appreciate
Yeah.
everyone coming.
Hello, everyone.
Just make sure the mic's on, so.
Yeah. Hello, can you hear me now?
We can hear you, Mike. How are you?
Hello, everyone. My name is Michael Chen. I live on 75 Pastures Lane. I've lived in New Canaan for over 30 years. My 4 kids grew up in New Canaan. I grew up in New York City. I was born in New York City, but I've lived more in New Canaan than any other town. And so this is my town, and I love this town. And this town over 30 years ago welcomed me to this town. And I've given back a lot to this town. I've been on a lot of boards, the baseball board, many years. I'm on the advisory council in New Canaanite. And I've been on the Board of Finance the last 7 years. I'm committed to helping out this town, and I love this town.
You coach basketball.
I coach basketball, I coach
We could've used-
baseball, coach football, a lot of charity events in this town as well. And I also love my neighbors. You heard from two of my neighbors that I've known for over 20 years, because I've lived on Pastures Lane for over 20 years. I was the last house that was bought in development. You'll hear from Don Sheldon, who will speak on behalf of the only other neighbor. She's a single mom, taking care of her kids, so she can't be here tonight. But unanimously, all of us are here supporting the appeal. And so I think he'll speak on behalf of her. Unanimously, I would say, is because we've lived together. I've lived 20 years with them with no issue. We've gotten to know each other. We've enjoyed each other's company. We all work hard. We don't see each other all the time, but we respect each other and we care for each other. And when our new neighbor came and bought this property, I wanted to care for him and her as well. And, you know, we had two phone calls with the neighbor. I had two phone calls with the neighbor. My other neighbors had phone calls with them too, to try to reconcile this amicably, because that's what I like to do. I want to reconcile things amicably. Unfortunately, those two calls, we weren't able to reconcile it. I just asked, basically, I said, I welcome the neighborhood. I just asked that you don't put any fence that's visible, okay? Because this was a cow pasture, like they said. It was a cow pasture. It was an open meadow. It was beautiful. And when he said he wanted to make it into a compound, I said, well, you know, that's not what it's intended to be. But if you do, at least make the fences not visible to us. That didn't work. So then I reached out to the town planner, had very nice conversations with our town planner to try to explain to her the concern of the fence, the deer fence. She asked them to paint a darker color to make it kind of blend in the landscape. And I said, great, let's take a look and see what it looks like afterwards. When she painted a darker color, it was probably just as bad, if not worse. It's clearly visible, and I can show you the pictures. And as my neighbor said, it's an eyesore at the end of the day.
At 50 feet, do you think it's especially visible?
At 1 feet, it's especially visible. At 200 feet, it's especially visible. At
That's my
50 feet.
question.
And now, the word that I think me and Sad disagree on, what the word especially is. Look, my house is not especially visible at night. Okay? So it's your interpretation of what do you call especially visible? That fence is especially visible. It's not especially visible at night. The flagpole that we have is not especially visible at night. So you can always argue to say what is especially visible and what is not. But like my neighbor says, if you just drive down that street, common sense would say that's especially visible. You can see that as clear as any place. And if it's not especially visible, then put the trees on the other side of the fence. But you know, if you're not going to say that fence is not especially visible, then nothing is especially visible. Period. Like that's especially as visible as anything else out there. And I think Sarah's correct when I said, well, I think there's a zoning violation. How do I raise it? And she said the only way to raise it is through this form, because we wouldn't have given them the gate permit if we thought there was a zoning violation. So the way to address this is to go to the zoning board of appeals. So that's why I'm here. Otherwise, I would deal with it directly. But under her advisement, it said the only way you can appeal this fence is through the zoning board of appeals, because she would have not, if she said she would not have given the gate permit if she thought it was a violation. So if you appeal the violation, if you think there's a violation, this is the way to go. So that's why we're here. I would just say the section 65C4C, what you're talking about, how is one row of trees considered wood area? That place was all open, that front yard. They put the fence up and they put one row of trees. One row of trees is a wooded area? Like that's the most bizarre thing I've heard about a wooded area. Like someone said, put one row of trees here on the street and all of a sudden it becomes a wooded area. That's a silly definition of wooded area. A wooded area is a wooded area. We know what a wooded area is. It's not one row of trees that are planted there. That's not a wooded area. And the second thing I would say is, like I said, if you haven't driven down there, right, please drive down there. I can show you, like, you know, at the end of the day, let me just show you that you can just see these.
I'm sorry,
pictures.
everything needs to be in the record if you're showing the board. so
Yeah,
it
could
needs
you,
to either
maybe
be
if you email it
submitted-
to Sarah, she could add it to the record?
Yeah, I can email you all these. But, you know, it was very ironic that the one picture that was shown there of these fences was probably in the shadows where it made the fences look kind of like not very clear. It's very interesting, but that's what I'm saying. Don't look at my pictures. Don't look at her pictures. Just go down Pasture Lane and you'll know what is especially visible is. So at the end of the day, look, like I said, I have never, ever complained about any of my neighbors in the 30 years here. I've never complained about any of my neighbors anywhere I lived, you know, because I want to work out things amicably, right? Because I love this town and I love Pasture Lane. I love my neighbors and they're great neighbors. We're respectful of each other. And I would just like to close and say, at the end of the day, you know, take a look and see what makes sense, all right? We wanted to have another neighbor come in here that we could welcome in. But instead, this neighbor rejected all of us and said, that's fine, but I'm gonna do what I'm gonna do. And that's not very neighborly. And this town is built on friendship and love for one another. And I'm just disappointed that this new neighbor coming in has kind of thumbed his nose against all of us. So thank you.
Thanks.
Well, this is it. Sorry it came to this.
Can you say your name?
Yeah.
And address?
My name is Don.
You need to turn it to green.
Turn it off?
Yeah, you're good.
I think I know how to use a microphone by now. My name's Don Sheldon. I'm 118 Pastures Lane. Live next door to Dave Schwartz, right next door to him. And like everyone else in the neighborhood, I've been there for 24 years. I moved there when my son was born. And I don't have a lot more to add to what everybody else has said. I'm going to give each of you permission to go into my driveway and go into my backyard, right? And exit, you know, so that you can see what I have to go through every day. And I'm going to give you a real life story. About a month and a half ago, when we had a really serious rainstorm, it was very bad. It was really raining hard. My daughter, with my 2-year-old granddaughter, was coming into the driveway as a Amazon truck was leaving and nearly hit the car. It was very, very close. And the Amazon guy actually told me, he said, you know, I can't see. It's what Dave Schwartz is talking about. You guys need to go in there and take a look and drive out because it's a problem. Then I would ask you to ask yourself another question. It would have been so easy for the new neighbors, right? It would have been so easy for them, right, to push that fence back a little bit and put the trees, right, on our side. Now, why did he do that? Why did they do that? Why did they deliberately extend that fence out to the point where it's a hazard and then put the trees on their side so they don't have to look at the fence? Just ask yourself that question. Why would they do that? I don't know the answer to that. Nobody I know would do that.
Are you talking about the stockade fence or the
Yeah,
dog fence?
yeah, I'm talking about the stockade fence, right? Where the point where page 12, I think it is, page 12. So I would just ask that question. I would ask you to ask yourself that question. You know, why would somebody do that? And I don't have the answer to that.
So is this view on page 12 from your driveway?
This is from my front door. Yeah. So literally that's from my front door. So if I was leaving my driveway, the Schwartz would be coming in from this direction. It would be coming in from the left. And then the trucks would be coming down the driveway this way, or anybody else who's coming down the access road. So that would have been so easy, right, folks? I mean, this fence could have been pushed back, right? Trees could have been planted along the other side of the fence to make it aesthetically pleasing to everybody and safe at the same time. So why do you have to take every single inch of your property and do that? I'm at a loss for that. I'm at a loss. I think we all are. I think all of the people on Pastures Lane, and I'm speaking also on behalf of Ellie Dyke, who couldn't be here tonight. She's the only other resident on Pastures
What's
Lane.
her address?
Her name is Ellie Dyke.
What?
Do you guys know what her address is?
The only one that's like, I don't know.
Yeah, I can't think of
Between
it.
89 and.
Yeah, it's the only one.
89.
So she couldn't be here tonight. I'm just speaking on her behalf. She is also facing that blockade. What is it? Yeah, 103, yeah. She also is facing that blockade right in her face. And with no trees in front of it.
Wait, so which, where does, can you put the map up again?
103.
It's just helpful to picture these.
Is this one down here?
Okay,
It's a little, yeah,
that's okay.
The first one.
yeah.
So basically, everyone in development has the same issues.
Those three
Except-
there, yeah.
Yeah.
Again,
for the
and again, just for the record, again, those trees that they planted all along the inside of that fence.
So there's trees inside the wooden fence.
Yeah, there's trees on the other side of that wooden fence that they planted, could have been planted on this side, right? So that she's not just looking at a blockade fence. I mean, it looks like a prison. It looks like a prison. And so why, I just don't understand why somebody would do this, but they did. And that's why we're here, and I'm sorry that we're here. But every single person on Pastures Lane who's been there for 20 years plus is all in agreement that, we're just appealing to you. This is an appeal board. We're just appealing to you, to do whatever you can. I don't know what you can do, but whatever you can do, do it.
The fence along Pastures Lane, the purported deer fence that runs along the pasture there.
Yeah.
At 50 feet, is that especially visible?
Oh, it's visible from 200 feet or.
No, is it especially?
It's especially visible from the road. There's no question about it. So that's it. I don't have much more to say.
Luke, what may be helpful if we, even so the lady at 103 cannot be here, a statement from her
Yeah,
would be.
I don't know if we close the meeting tonight though, which I think I'd be inclined to do. Assuming no one else has additional evidence to present, then she can't, once it's closed, it's closed.
We can't do it.
Okay. She wrote something up.
Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't, it's not signed. She just sent it to me. She says you can read this on my behalf.
And could you represent to us that this is
Yeah,
her
I can-
statement?
yep, this is from her. This is an email
Can we
from her.
introduce that email into the
Sure.
record?
Yep.
Maybe she can call
If he can.
You can have it.
No,
This is just an email. she
No,
sent.
if he submitted it to the record,
submit it to
please just
Sarah.
provide it
Yeah.
to me and I
Sarah
will add
Sarah will
it to
then
the
circulate
record.
it.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure.
Or if you want to read it, you can read it as well. You can
No,
say
I'd be
that.
happy to read it quickly. It's not much. She just said, due to safety concerns because of this blockade effect, we no longer enter our driveway in the manner we have always previously done for nearly 14 years due to the fence interrupting sight lines to your driveway vehicle activity. We still exit that way because we can see from that angle. This is, of course, only part of the issue we have with the fencing blockade and takeover and transformation and lack of stewardship of our lovely Pastures Lane neighborhood. What a disappointment that there seems to be a lack of regard for what had been Pastures Lane, what I always called the most beautiful street in New Canaan, as well as a shame that our new neighbors will not be enjoying a peaceful transition to their new home due to the lack of due diligence and courtesy. Though I sincerely wish them well, I hope and pray they do right by all of us. Ellie Dyke.
That's from Ellie Dyke.
That's from
Oh,
Ellie
why don't
Dyke.
Sarah put it for
Yeah.
the record, whatever. Thank you.
So that's everybody on Pastures Lane.
Okay.
That's the whole road, all right? And like I said, just in closing, I don't know what you can do. Maybe you can't do anything, but if you can do something, do it, please. Thank you very much.
Again, we
Yeah.
appreciate everyone's time. I guess why don't we start at the beginning, if anyone else has anything, anything to add or to clarify, Attorney Lampert, I guess you'd go first then.
I just want to try to rebut or respond to some of the issues that came up by the other presenters. First point regarding the timeliness of the appeal. We received a letter, which is part of the record, from the town planner telling us the time to appeal based upon the issuance of the permits. And we filed our appeal within that time period. So as far as I'm concerned, it's timely. As far as the issue dealing with standing, a building permit can't be issued if there's a zoning violation. We're saying there's a zoning violation, so I think that it is ripe, and I think we have standing to decide this. Also, if there's an issue of interpretation as to a zoning regulation, this is the place to bring it. Right now, we're discussing what constitutes a front yard, what constitutes visibility, what constitutes, what's in the woods, what's not. So I think all of these issues are ripe for this board to hear to help define what the regulations mean.
But you're not appealing the decision of the building permit or?
No, the zoning permit, I'm sorry,
You said building.
the zoning permit.
Okay.
But I'm saying a building permit can't be issued even to build if there's a zoning violation or there's no zoning permit.
Okay,
That may not be right for this board, but just a fact.
okay.
This is being used as a venue
Yeah,
to try to
exactly.
do something about the issue
Yeah.
because you can't issue the permit if there's a violation.
So zoning violation, look, the other choice, obviously, and it may be in conjunction with this, is to say that there's a lack of zoning enforcement and do a writ of mandamus, right?
I mean, because that's the.
Well, that's a separate issue. That's something that we're
If
considering.
this board, let's say this board said there wasn't a decision
Yeah.
by the zoning enforcement officer and this letter from Sarah was, not an appealable decision.
Yeah.
Then you'd have a writ of mandamus.
That's-
Send it and you petition the Superior Court
100%.
and the judge would then tell Sarah to render a decision one way or the other.
Right.
And then we'd be back to the same place.
Correct. But my position is that this is right, that these are issues that this tribunal needs to address. And that's why we're addressing it here. We think there is a violation. There's
But you're
different
an
ways.
attorney, where our
Yeah.
jurisdiction is limited, like we need a decision
Yeah.
to hear.
I understand. And I think we have the ability to do that here. The other thing is, and I don't have to tell the town planner or position, but there's an ongoing duty with enforcement. It doesn't stop because you didn't enforce something yesterday. If it's in violation today, or if your mind changes, you enforce it. You have to enforce violations, all the time. It doesn't just disappear, that obligation. And if there is a violation or there's a perceived violation, this is the right place to be, and we're here. Whether I choose to do a writ of mandamus is up to me tomorrow. And I may, because I can do that. But right now I'm here because I think this is right for the issues that are in front of this board. And as far as this issue that there's a separate rule for deer fences, I disagree. I've never seen that. I think that 6.5C2 defines all fences, and that 6.5C4 A, B, and C is the exception. If you do have a deer fence, what you can do. That's how I read it. So I read it much differently, and I could be wrong with that, but
Well, that's good. You're talking fast. I can't flip pages that fast.
6 point.
trying to get you guys out of here tonight.
Yeah, we're volunteers.
I had it in my.
6.5.2, you said?
6.5C2 says, and I'll go to that next in a second, but it says no fence and no fence and freestanding wall shall exceed the following heights. It doesn't carve out a deer fence there. Now, if you go to 6.5C4 A, B, and C, which I do want to talk about right now. That
6.5.
says.
What section did you say?
C4, A, 6.5 C4, A, B, and C. What that says is notwithstanding the limitations in C2, unless permitted by a special permit, deer fences, the first time we hear deer fences, may be installed to a height not to exceed 8 feet, provided the following. So I'm saying, in my mind, and I could be wrong, that 6.5 C2 does define the height of all fences. And 6.5 C4, A, B, and C is the exception, which includes the deer fences. And this is really important. The first 45 feet you guys are talking about only applies to section A. A says a deer fence installed in a front yard, and this is the only section that talks about front yards, which is this 45-foot setback, shall be installed in a wooded area and or a screen from the street. So that doesn't mean it doesn't go beyond 45 feet, because I think the rest of the fence is in violation too. Just so we're clear, because
Wait, well, slow down here. Okay, man, I'm a little slow, especially at 8:30 at night or whatever. 10 o'clock.
You're really slow.
Yeah, really slow. I came back from California last night, so it's only like 7 o'clock. But, so you're saying C2, your position, and I know there's not gonna be agreement on this, but just,
defines all fences.
okay. And then you're saying C4 creates a carve out for deer fences to certain provisions of C2, but not all of C2?
No, for all, whatever C4 carves out, it carves out from C2.
I know, but if you look at C 6.5 C4
0.5 C4, yeah,
A,
yeah, that's a carve out.
but you look at the picture on the page before, wouldn't the screened area just be the front yard setback line?
That's for section A, correct. I agree with
Okay, so
that.
you agree with that?
Yeah.
I think we need to pay attention to the fact that in the section 6.5 C4, there is the clause that starts notwithstanding, and then there's a separate clause, unless permitted, which means that anything that's already restricted in 6.5 C2 could be already sort of allowed for in another way by special permit.
Mm.
So when I've used notwithstanding in a clause, when I write contracts, it usually means forget everything else and here's what's going on forward.
I'm
So
agreeing with
I'm
you.
not really fully sold on your interpretation
No,
yet.
I agree with you. I'm agreeing with you.
I don't think we're aligned.
So then,
Okay, I do. 6.5 C 4 A, B, and C says what you can do.
I'm saying I'm interpreting that here is saying that this is a separate treatment for deer fence, basically.
Yes.
Okay, which would be 8 feet.
It's-
Oh, not here, sorry.
Yeah.
It's not here, but no, but it's just to the front yard and everything else.
It's-
I'm not sure I got what
Well,
you
do
were
you have any
saying
other
yet.
provision that you can point me to that says where there's a deer
No,
fence?
I just- Connect for me one more time
Yeah.
what you're trying to say.
Yeah.
Because I'm just reading this bottom half separate. So what is it you're trying to connect?
Okay. So.
Are you
what-
just trying to have us look at the standard as being only 6.5 C2?
no,
No,
C4.
C
I
two,
think he's trying to.
I'm
have
not.
us look at
I'm not.
just
You're,
this for the-
you're,
the
what I'm saying is C2 defines all fences. And then you go to 4 A, B, and C, and that's what allows deer fences right there. It's telling you, a deer fence can be 8 feet provided.
No.
You're saying, I think the two of you are saying the same thing.
I think so too.
And what you're saying is that the general rule is C2.
Two, that's right.
Let's ignore C2 for a deer fence.
Correct.
to which
It has
C4
seemed you were trying to say it should be 4 feet.
No.
So I,
No,
No, unless there's a carve out, it should be 4 feet, but here's the carve out. The carve out says feet,
yeah,
provided the following.
yeah.
All right, then
We're saying the same
Yeah,
thing.
you're
we
saying the
might
same
be
thing.
saying the same thing, but it was not clear that that.
Right,
the
it's
leap
like
you
the
were making.
phrase notwithstanding.
Yeah.
the
No,
above.
I just-
Yeah.
I
What I'm
was
saying
under the
is-
impression you were trying to still argue it should be 4 feet.
Is the
No.
I wanted
fence
to make sure I
on,
understood.
No, but
is the fence measured from the pole? How do you measure the height of the fence? Is it measured from the top of the pole or from the
it's
top
from
wire?
grade up
To what?
to the top of the fence.
Oh, the top of the pole?
Yeah.
Which
That's what
one?
it should be.
No, I'm asking the
That's
question.
how I measure it, yes,
From the ground to the pole.
to the highest point.
Fences typically
Yeah.
though, it's the main panel. That's how they're manufactured by companies that create
Oh.
fences. Typically, like the panel is
Is
6
eight.
feet and then the post tends to be a few
Yeah,
inches
that's what my
higher.
question is.
And that's, we interpreted it as the or not the post, the panel, because fence companies, how they're manufactured, that's how they're manufactured. The
What if
the
the
panels,
Or 4 feet or 8.
But what if the panels say a foot off the ground? Because oftentimes, the panel's not,
It's from grade.
yeah, that's what I think.
I think
it'd
we
be
all
from
agree it's
grade.
from grade.
So if it's a 6-foot high panel and the panels say foot off the ground, it's a 7-foot high fence.
Yeah, but we don't have that in this situation. But I
Okay, so
think
that's
we
not an
both
issue here.
agree it's from grade level. We probably disagree as to the height being the top. I think it's the post. You think it's probably.
So, I mean,
probably-
in a perfect world, it is the post. I'm just saying a lot of manufacturers, it's the panel and we're not gonna require custom fences. in
And
the
I
whole
respect
town.
that. I
The-
disagree with it, but I
But,
understand.
but is there an issue about the fence, the stockade fence?
Yes.
Exceeding 6 feet?
Yes. We raised that in our brief saying that it exceeds 6 feet and we believe that where the posts are, it does. It's not our biggest issue today, but that's an issue.
But it's not an issue about being spaced above the ground at the top of the post?
That's correct. And I would agree with the town planner that the fence height is 6 feet, but for the posts that are up top.
I mean, we're trying to
I know.
be practical here too,
but-
like they were saying, you're not gonna custom cut fences to make them 2 inches shorter.
No, but I actually want to get to, because we have limited time, I want to get some more of the important issues with what we had discussed. And when I get to the C4A, and it says a deer fence installed in a front yard shall be installed in a wooded area and or screened from the street by landscaping. The town planner seemed to argue that because there were trees behind the fence, that that's a wooded area. If you accept that proposition, then the fence in the front could also be in front of those trees, which is absurd.
I think that's the question we raised.
That's absurd.
Yep.
So if you agree with that, then the fence in the front can be, so I just had to raise that. The next thing on section B, and they highlight only part of it. What's highlighted should be of dark or other color. What's not highlighted is that it blends with the natural landscape. That's not highlighted there. So what I'm saying is this fence does not blend with a natural landscape. A deer fence that I used to have did. It was mesh, black posts, you didn't see it. These posts are industrial 4x4 big wood blocks, and they are anything but blending with natural landscape. And section C, and they're not of open design, by the way. Section C, open design. When you have wood blocks every 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, that's not open design. Open design is open. This is common sense stuff like what one of the owners said before. I think it was Mr. Reed said that. But so I wanted to address those, and I'm almost done.
Where's the open design?
C, that it's not especially visible at a distance of 50 feet in
That
open
kind
design.
of runs into especially.
Yeah, yeah, so, um,
I mean, open design, they're saying not a stockade fence, I would presume. They're not saying poles have to be of an open design.
I'm saying the fence has to be of open design, not just the whole thing. They're talking about open design. Look, I had a deer fence in my house. I know other people that, I don't even know how that would ever constitute a deer fence. It seems like a blockade fence to me.
But that's the question that we
Yeah,
kind of
it's
started.
interpretation, yeah.
It's
I understand.
interpretive, okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
We raised 6.9A before, and that it doesn't apply because it doesn't abut the access way and the main road. I just disagree with the interpretation of what's intended for that. I think when you're talking about access ways and the driveway abuts it, I'm gonna put in my position is that that section does apply. I understand people can disagree with it. I think it does abut it. I think that's the intent, that anything that abuts a main road that has an obstruction that was designed, it says a corner lot or not a corner lot. To me, it applies to everything. My interpretation.
Wait, can you, why don't you explain that? Because I think I'm reading it as,
Okay,
and I think most people are reading this as
Yeah.
it having to be along
Yeah.
the street.
Tell you one thing, it's not easy to read.
I
On a
read it
co-
as a street.
Yeah,
Yeah, all
So,
right.
I mean, we're,
because we're bound by the terms of this.
I am.
We can't add words to it.
So my reading of it is, says a corner lot or one not on a corner, which is everything. But abutting an access way, which it does at an intersection with a street, and I think the whole access way is at an intersection with the street. That's how I'm reading it. For better or worse. I understand your reading of it.
You're trying to bundle individual driveways to that.
Yeah.
They're all connected
Well,
up
this
to the
is what-
street.
He's trying to say that every individual driveway that meets the access road is part of the access
Yeah.
road, and thus they all.
And I understand the other reading too. I just think it's a tough reading. So when you're talking about safety, I think
anything that could drive on it.
that's my,
Yeah.
that's how I look at it. So
Listen.
I'm not asking for an agreement. I'm just saying that's my interpretation of it.
But it says
Yes.
placed or maintained within the triangular area formed by the intersection of street lines.
I understand. I'm gonna stick with my interpretation.
Okay.
All right.
Okay.
Last section. Lot 92. Subdivided, there's no issue, it's subdivided. It was part of the subdivision. You can't have the best of both worlds and say it's subdivided and not merge it. Either merge it and put an end to it, or it's subdivided and it could be sold. And you cannot allow a zoning violation to exist in advance of something happening. If he wants to merge it, it'll never happen. But he can't have the best of both worlds and leave it open for one day and then take the fence down and play games with this. It's either it's a separate lot or it's not. And our opinion is when that subdivision was approved, it became a separate lot, it's taxed separately. And if he wants to get rid of that separate designation and treat it like one lot, then he has to do it and merge the lots. And I know that there's no way this would ever get approved as a subdivision today if that fence was up without the necessity to remove the fence before the subdivision was approved. And you all know that, and everybody knows it. So to allow it to happen after the fact is just not appropriate. And that's all I have today.
I appreciate it.
Thank you guys very much for listening to me. I know it's a late hour today, so thank you.
Actually, I have a question.
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure who's best to answer it in terms of the question of a street or an access way. So looking at the driveway that gets access 103, 115, 118.
Yes.
Who owns that?
Who owns the access way?
That driveway that those.
I think it's owned by all of the parties. Is that correct? Yes, it's owned by all of them. And in fact, they all have rights of ingress and egress over that access way.
Without an easement.
Yes. Yep.
And so for example, like snow plowing and take, who you guys all chip in or?
My guy does it, comes and goes.
Oh, you don't charge them?
It's been 20 years, they're all.
Somebody else does it. Usually neighbors.
Thank you.
So there is in the zoning regulations a definition for the street. I can share my screen if that's helpful. Can everyone see that?
Okay, public and private. Yep.
Where?
She's got
Right at the top.
for travel vehicle.
I'm looking for a private roadway.
All right.
And we do have a separate definition for access way in the regulations as well, so, I mean, our
What,
interpretation.
is an access way a street? Or is it
No,
any
an
kind of a
access
private
way-
roadway?
So a private roadway would be something like,
Like your road?
Indian
Like-
Waters Drive.
Yeah.
yeah, like
Yeah,
your
exactly.
street, that's not an access way, that's a private road. An access way is servicing a rear lot to give them access
Okay.
or multiple.
Yeah. I'll just say first, since we're on the topic, as far as the access way. So the distinction is that the access way is typically owned by one, the actual land is owned by one or maybe a couple, sometimes a couple lots, but it is not a private road that is a separate entity on the map, separately defined on the map. Private roads have special restrictions on how wide they can be, et cetera.
Who owns the private road?
There's no private road in this case. There's an access way. Access
I'm
way,
saying if there was a private road, is it owned by the abutters or is it?
general, private roads are, it depends on how they're formed. Sometimes they're owned by the abutters. The subdivision will say that each has an undivided, let's say there are 8 houses, an undivided 1/8 interest in the road. Sometimes there's a road association and the association actually owns the road.
Okay, thank you.
Indian Waters Drive. So just to answer the question about this particular property, if you look at the subdivision map, it does appear that the access way is divided into 3 separate sections, one of which is owned by parcel 239, which doesn't really help because I don't have the addresses on this. Yeah, I think that's 118. The majority of it looks like it's owned by 118. Part of it is owned by my client's property, 92. The other part of it seems to be owned by parcel 240, which is the one think that they were saying was owned by Ms. Dyke. So that access way, if you look at the subdivision map, does show the land being owned. Now, maintenance is often separate, as they said, they all have to share in the maintenance, but because they all have easements over it, but the ownership of the land is with specific lots. So that was just to answer that question, because that came up as I was walking up. But I think I really want to respond to, again, circle back to the very beginning, which is what we're looking at here. I'm concerned that I feel that a lot of the conversations have basically rewritten the appeal that was filed. The applicants are held by what appeal they filed. The appeal they filed doesn't say anywhere in the July 30th letter that they are appealing the issuance of the zoning permit for the gate because there are existing zoning violations. It says that they are appealing the town planner's failure to enforce code violations. That is what they are appealing, and they are held by the terms of their appeal. And as we've discussed, the failure to enforce violations is not appealable to the Zoning Board of Appeals. They're asking you to enforce the regulations. That's not within your jurisdiction. It's also not within your jurisdiction in the face of this appeal to interpret the regulations. If there is a process by which someone can ask the Zoning Board of Appeals to interpret a regulation, that is a separate process. That's not what's been done here. This is an appeal of the zoning enforcement officer's decision to issue a zoning permit for the gate. I think it was very obvious from the neighbors' comments that what they're concerned about is that the property, the community that they've been part of for 20 years is changing. And that is happening. There's no question about that. My clients happen to prefer more privacy. They prefer having a fence around their property. That's their right. It is their property. They own it. And they have every right to put up a fence around their property. And I'm sorry that the neighbors are not happy about that. Of course, we would all prefer that neighbors all got along. But there is a litigation, one of the gentlemen who spoke brought up the covenant. That is what the private litigation is about. And that is the proper venue for those disputes to be resolved, not within this room.
Well, we're not reviewing the
Yeah.
litigation on covenant. I don't even know what the issues are in it.
Right.
We're just talking about these issues raised in the appeal.
Correct. And I guess what I'm
And whether or
saying
not
is,
the appeal is a valid appeal.
correct. And I guess what I'm trying to say is that I think it's the concerns of the neighbors have more to do with the fact that their neighborhood is changing in ways that they did not expect. And that is not something that is within the jurisdiction of this board to enforce, nor do they have a right unless you have, somebody can build a house and, block your view of, a beautiful vista. But unless you have a view easement, they can do that. They have their right. That's what private property rights are all about. And again, I think it's unfortunate that this is how my clients have been welcomed into this community. I don't want to get into any of the personal stuff as far as did they reach out? They did. But that ship has obviously sailed at this point, but we need to stay focused on what they're actually asking for within the terms of the appeal and what's within the jurisdiction of this board and not get distracted by these other matters that are much more emotional.
And it's your position that the proper avenue to appeal this is not the July 11th or 18th or whatever date letter. It's because that wasn't a decision. It's appealable.
No, there was the decision that they appealed was the issuance of the zoning permit for the gate. That was a decision. No, there is no dispute from me that the issuance of a zoning permit is an appealable decision.
Okay.
And they appealed that.
Okay.
But what I'm saying is that when you read their appeal, they don't talk about anything about the gate. And this argument that was brought up today that, we're appealing the issuance of the gate because there were zoning violations is not something that's raised in their appeal. This is the first time they're bringing that up today. And that's not what they appealed. What they appealed was the failure to enforce the zoning regulations.
But I mean, the way I read the appeals, and I guess maybe I'm reading it with broadly, I'm gonna try to read this more carefully, because, trying to absorb this all. As everyone else in this room
Of course.
is that it was pretty broadly drafted. They're asking for any relief that can be granted, this and that. It's like, we're doing this, and if this, ain't anything else type of thing.
But they're not allowed to ask for and anything else. Again, remember, this is a statutorily defined right to appeal a zoning permit. And the zoning permit was to install a gate. And they didn't, the appeal that they filed doesn't tie back, other than to the fact that they say that we first learned that the zoning permit for the gate was issued on the 17th, and we appealed within 15 days of that. That's the only way that they tie it back to that zoning permit. As one of the neighbors mentioned, the fence was there for much longer than the gate. This is not, they're trying to appeal their argument that the zoning enforcement officer hasn't enforced the regulations properly. Now, as we've discussed, I agree with the zoning enforcement officer, and I think they have enforced the zoning regulations properly. But that's really neither here nor there. The question is, was the permit for the gate properly issued? I think that's all that I have, unless there are any further questions.
So you believe the decision was an appeal? I'm just trying to make sure I have this distinction right, because I think this legal issue is,
right.
I mean, you don't get FESCO, you don't collect $200. So it was a decision that's appealable, the gate permit, the zoning permit for the gate.
Correct.
But the appeal that they prepared did not connect the fence issues back to the gate issues.
Correct. They have filed an appeal that said that they are appealing, it says in the first paragraph, they are appealing the town planner's failure to enforce code violations.
So are you saying even if we agreed that should be revoked, the only thing that could be revoked is the gate permit?
If you feel that the gate,
I'm saying if the board with the committee felt that it's appealable, the only thing we would be able to appeal is the permit for the gate, for the fence, the gate.
The gate. If you feel that the zoning enforcement officer did not properly issue a permit for the gate, then yes, you can overrule that decision. But you have to say why. But again, there wasn't any evidence given today that had anything to do with the
Well, I think
gate.
they did reference a gate, with the position being that to issue the zoning permit for a gate, there couldn't be another existing violation on the property.
Right, but that's.
So
but
if
that-
there was another existing violation on the property, then we could find that the zoning permit for the gate shouldn't have been issued.
Right, but can we do anything with the deer fence and the stockade?
Well, I think then, that's an interesting question. What?
Right. So let me answer that. Let me answer two parts to that. So the first is, I guess what I'm trying to say is that in their actual appeal, they don't say anywhere in here that because there was a zoning violation, they couldn't issue a permit for the gate. So that's why I'm saying I don't think they have tied the two together. The fact that they may have tied some of that together tonight, that wasn't in their appeal. That's the sort of my first point. But to answer your question, if your decision is that the gate permit shouldn't have been issued, it's still, all that you're saying is that you have to, that CO for the gate is revoked. The CO or the permit, yeah.
Right.
The CO's not good.
Sorry, the permit for the
The
gate,
permit, right.
The zoning permit, not the building
the
permit.
zoning permit.
And then just playing it out, if I'm allowed to, then the town would go back to the owner and say, you can't do the gate, you gotta knock it down. Then, he or she, the property owner would say, well, what would I have to do to get the permit? Then that's starts that.
If that was what they decided to do, they could also just take the gate down.
And that's it.
Well, no, because then they would have found that there's a zoning violation. If they find there's a zoning violation, isn't there's like a $25 a day fine or something?
So, I mean, what would happen then is if, we do our job, if the board decides that they revoke the permit, we're not gonna not do our jobs. We will enforce the zoning regulations. That is what we are paid to do, and we will do so. And, we will take the enforcement actions, but we would likely restart the enforcement process by starting with, politely requesting that it's done. If they don't comply, then they get a cease and desist. And then if they don't comply with the cease and desist, then they would get fined. But it wouldn't be, an instant, do it tomorrow. It would be, okay, how much time do you need? Are you willing to do it? If not, okay, we'll escalate.
I don't know if anyone in the history of New Canaan, since we were part of Stanford or whatever city we came from, paid the $25 a day fine.
It's 150,
150,
but
whatever.
I'm not going to comment on that because it's our enforcement tool that we use. So
Still, you're obviously been in front of this board and P&Z and other boards, and you're well versed in the law as the other attorneys are here. Is there case law on how specific an appeal has to be? Kind of like a complaint, it just has to be enough to put you on like general notice. You don't have to be very specific in it. Are there cases saying, an appeal has to be like pretty specific?
And again, if you're planning on closing tonight, I don't know that I can cite to you case law off the top of my head, but yes, the whole purpose is to make sure that the board understands what is in front of them. And the appeal that was filed here is pretty specific. It says that they are appealing the town planner's failure to enforce code violations. I mean, this isn't a, you don't have I can't file a request to revise on an appeal to the zoning board of appeals. Like, it's not that type of process. You file your application. If your application is faulty, if it was a planning and zoning commission application, you'd withdraw and you'd file again. But you can't resurrect an appeal that you didn't file by making a different argument in front of the board. Because again, it's appellate work. This isn't a.
Well, we're hearing de novo. It's not really appellate work.
No, in this case, this is appellate work where you're reviewing. That was why, and I'm sorry to say this, but this is why I said at the beginning that normally it's the town planner that presents first, because you are reviewing the town planner's decision. It's not de novo.
Correct, but with no deference to her decision.
I'm not really sure that I agree with that. I think there is some deference given to the staff's decision because they're the ones who are interpreting the regulation.
I think we disagree with that on that point, but I don't know, maybe we can discuss this with Sarah before we close the meeting tonight, if we decide to close it tonight, whether or not people could submit a written brief after this on case law, or it's either open or closed. Yeah, so I think we'd probably be inclined to close it then.
So I mean, you can keep it open. I did check the timelines. It's the same as a variance, so you have time to keep it open. And I mean, we can, if you want, we could have the town attorney come next time to confirm everything, so you're not, relying on, no offense to attorneys that are being paid by their clients and,
Well,
have the
I think
attorney
though,
that-
if we had briefs by the attorneys, I think that a lot of stuff has been said about what the law is or isn't, and there are attorneys on this board, but I just think it'd be helpful to have briefs where, these points are spelled out. I mean, maybe other people on the board have it, but at the same time, I don't know if I'd want to leave it open if it means, next month we're here revisiting 16 new issues.
So I mean, you as chair can control what is or isn't discussed when it continues to be open. So you could just have it be open specifically to hear from the town attorney about this item. You don't have to permit more evidence being submitted. There really shouldn't be any more evidence because the action is over. It finished on July 11th when we issued the zoning permit. That's
I
it.
think, I think you can take advice from town council after you close the hearing.
Okay.
You would not be able to accept a brief from myself or Attorney Lambert.
No,
but you can-
that's my concern.
But you can, if you are accepting advice from town council, I'm fairly certain you can accept that.
Yeah, we
because
can do that at one
That's part of
business
your
session.
deliberation.
Yeah.
That's
We
your
have a
business.
pretty fulsome record. I would say the only thing that might be helpful would be to hear from the town attorney.
Because there's a couple of procedural issues on it, the deference question, the what is a decision, whether or not one was made question.
I mean, I will just add that I did present this concern and this potential deficiency to the town attorney and his recommendation that everything be fully heard by the board. Because despite there being deficiencies in the appeal and not clearly stating what, Attorney Zabatakis just articulated that, those regulations that I had stated, still exist. And so it is in the board's best interest to hear everything at a minimum.
Do you have anything else you want to add? And then I'll ask anyone else here if they have anything to add, and then I think, we need a motion, I'm sorry, do we need a motion to close the business session? I mean, the open session, move to business, so I'll just do that. Yeah. I just want to make sure everyone's had an opportunity to be heard before I say that, because once we close the meeting, we're moving to business session. And then, we can vote next month.
Correct.
And then, okay, then I'll Amy go again. I just want to make sure everyone has a chance. And then, but let's also try to be punctual.
For me, it was very clear from the memo that the town planner knew exactly what the appeal was about, that there was no confusion to anybody and everybody knew what we were here for. We were here because the zoning permit was issued, in our opinion, with existing zoning violations. And the zoning violations that were discussed were the fences, and that's why we're here. And I don't think there was any misunderstandings whatsoever as to the purpose of this hearing.
Okay,
One question.
yes.
I would like to know, I do not have a chance to visit the property. Is there a difference in photos? I'd like to visit the property.
Oh, that's a good question.
No, I mean, you can.
I mean, is visiting the property taking in new evidence?
No, I mean, because it's evidence that you've been subject to, I think that's acceptable, but,
Does,
you
you don't have to visit the property to be able to vote because the record's before you? Do you have an opinion on?
I was just gonna say, you can't visit the property as a group because that.
Oh, yeah, it's not a meeting.
But individually, that's
Yeah,
just part of
and of
your.
course, the property owners know, there's no conversations on this. Everyone is clear. This is, we visit properties and it's not to hear someone argue outside the record, and we visit them independently because of open meeting laws and things like that.
That no one can speak
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, this
any of
would
your
be for me to
individual-
drive.
So I mean,
That's-
I mean, you can get out and look at it. We generally try to look at all the properties because it helps to understand it. So,
So I would like to speak.
yes, of course.
Give them a chance to, So I do just want to, quickly remind the board that the zoning regulations and the purpose of their enforcement, it's not about popular opinion. It's about what the language says. And I, greatly appreciate the members of the public taking the time to speak tonight. Staff heard their complaints multiple times. We offered to have meetings at town hall, speak to them on the phone. We had emails with them. I met with Mr. Chen and Attorney Lampert multiple times to discuss this. And so we did take it very seriously. But again, I just want to remind the board that the zoning regulations are not about popular opinion and how they're the interpretation and enforcement of them. It's about the language and what it states. And I just wanted to make that clear.
I think we're all aware of that. I think you've clearly done a yeoman's job on this as you're doing everything. And it's nice meeting you, Stephen. I'm sure you've done a diligent job on it too. But we have this issue with variance and stuff too, like feeling bad for someone. If someone's, make it better, it's not like grounds for us to give a decision. It's what the regulations say. Like we have limited jurisdiction here. Okay, so
Any other questions for me? Because I likely, usually I speak during business session, when you all have questions on the tax, but I likely will not speak during the business session of this, so.
okay,
Can I just kindly request that we have the business session next month?
yeah, no, I think we're going to. No, because, so I think the plan is
Would
this.
like to review
this-
everything.
Yeah, I would as well. That's what I was saying, is we close this and have business next month. It's a lot of
So
information.
why
then we
don't
could
you
have
maybe
town
close
council.
it officially next month? Because what if you review everything and you have questions and you
Because then
can't ask
otherwise
them?
people are gonna be submitting stuff between now and next month. I mean, that's the functional problem I see. I mean, I believe we have a complete record in front of us. So I believe would be helpful for us to, yeah,
just
we're
the-
gonna ask him, but one minute, Mr. Chen. I believe it'd be helpful for us to have the town council, so just before you leave, have the town council at the next
At
meeting
the next meeting for
to answer
the
these
business
legal
sessions. Yep,
questions. He can do that in business session, so if you
Yep.
could let Attorney Gelderman know.
will do.
Thank you. Yes.
Just one question. I submitted the photos of the place in case you don't get to see the property for the record. So that will be on the record and just the whole question is it especially visible? To the extent that they can put trees on the other side where it's not especially visible, that solves a lot of the problems. So I think the thing is, I agree with Sarah, Carrie, that the town planner, that it's the law that we should go by. And the law really says it can't be especially visible. I live across the street. And so I think that's a key thing you guys should all look at to determine whether it's especially visible from 50 feet. I see it every day. I drive by it every day. And it's especially visible. I think that's the main point.
We appreciate that.
Thank you.
And you already sent your pictures, they're already in the record. I don't want to close it before the email arrives and there's some sort of. You have the email with the picture. How many attachments or whatever, you have them all. Just confirm this before we close it. Because we're not, once it's closed,
So I mean, I have them, they're time stamped, there are 6 photos.
6 photos you sent? Okay. Well, again, we appreciate the neighbors, appreciate the attorneys, everyone has excellent lawyers. I'm gonna close the open meeting.
7 photos. Just for the record, 7 photos.
7 photos.
7, okay. I'm gonna close the meeting next month. We'll have, we're gonna move into business session now. Next month, the intent is to vote on it, the next month's meeting, so we can review what's in the record. No additional information. If someone wants to visit the site, that's their prerogative. Everyone understands that's to visit the site only. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
So I wasn't at the last meeting. You mean,
Last meeting.
We didn't have.
I
one.
mean, 2 meetings ago, I did, I had my own issue.
So you wanted to have a forum.
So who was, no, because who was at the minutes were
We didn't have a meeting last.
Karen, Cherokee, Boner and Snyder.
Oh, that was the last meeting we had.
So we have
1, 2, 3.
only 3.
And we would need probably one of them to be here to do the minutes.
No, because we have,
We may have to defer that.
we have 3.
Is that enough?
Sarah, do we need 4 to approve minutes or just?
No, it's only for variances and
Yeah, so 3 is
appeals,
okay.
yeah.
All right.
So.
I'll move to approve the minutes from, I guess,
I
June.
second.
So those present, can you state your name?
Cynthia Doe, I'm so tired.
In favor?
Cynthia Doe.
Cardin in favor.
Rich Carey, 2 in favor.
Okay. Is there anything else on the agenda for tonight?
No.
Okay. I'm gonna move to adjourn the meeting at, what time is it? 5 of 11 and 54.
He's.